Homeland Security will come to order. Without objection, the chair may declare the committee in recess at any point. The purpose of this hearing is to receive testimony from private sector stakeholders relating to the opportunities and challenges presented by the emergence of artificial intelligence and discuss how the Department of Homeland Security can develop and implement certain AI technologies in support of the Homeland Security mission. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. In this era of rapidly advancing technology, I'm especially proud to live in a nation of innovators, some of whom join us today. Today, American ingenuity is paving the way once again. Artificial intelligence, or AI, promises to transform the global economy and national security landscape as we know it. AI has the potential to create new jobs, catalyze productivity in Americans' daily lives, and of course, protect our men and women in uniform and law enforcement. Throughout this Congress, committees in both chambers have convened numerous hearings to understand the countless opportunities and challenges AI presents. Like cybersecurity, AI's impact is a complex and cross-cutting issue that cannot be handled by one jurisdiction alone. Therefore, we're here to examine what I believe to be one of the most promising areas in which to expand our use of AI, the security and defense of our homeland. The Committee on Homeland Security has an oversight obligation to make sure we harness AI technologies right. As with any new technology, AI presents new risks, and we must take the time to understand them. This includes prioritizing safety and security throughout AI development, deployment, and use. It also requires us to treat AI with appropriate nuance so that we understand the impact of proposed regulatory measures on our businesses. Today's full committee hearing follows up on a productive Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection Subcommittee hearing led by Chairman Garbarino last December. The subcommittee specifically considered the role of DHS and CISA in securing AI, a topic we will continue to explore today. As that hearing reaffirmed, the threats facing our country are increasingly complex, and DHS plays a critical role in keeping Americans safe and our country secure. DHS has a broad mission and has explored and even implemented AI for specific purposes aligned with its unique missions. For example, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has used AI-powered systems to monitor border areas using drones and cameras, which help identify suspicious activity and unauthorized crossings in real time. The Transportation Security Administration is currently examining the ways in which AI can enhance its security screening, including using AI to augment its X-ray imaging of travelers' carry-on luggage. TSA may soon look to AI algorithms, and particularly facial recognition, powered by AI to identify security threats among the traveling public and enhance the pre-screening process. With these AI-powered systems, while these AI-powered systems offer the promise of increased security and efficiency, they also bring significant risks that Congress must carefully assess. For instance, AI-powered facial recognition systems capture and store images of Americans and foreign travelers, which present substantial privacy concerns. We must ensure that the use of AI-powered facial recognition by TSA is balanced with strong protections of privacy, civil liberties, and ethical standards. Furthermore, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is using AI to help identify and track illegal activities such as human trafficking and smuggling by analyzing large data sets and detecting patterns. And the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, is carefully examining the risks and opportunities presented by AI and the way it can be leveraged to enhance our nation's resilience against cyber threats. In the years ahead, CISA will play a critical role in addressing and managing risks at the nexus of AI, cybersecurity, and critical infrastructure. Considering the widespread push for AI adoption within DHS, it is critical that the department collaborates with Congress and with relevant stakeholders, including those from the private sector, to manage AI's complexities and risks. In addition to the domestic concerns relating to the emergence of AI, we must also consider the broader strategic implications. Our nation's primary strategic adversary, the People's Republic of China, has made AI development a national priority and is investing heavily in its research, talent, and infrastructure. The communist regime's aggressive pursuit of AI poses a significant challenge to the United States, not only economically, but also in terms of our national security. In fact, DHS's 2024 Homeland Threat Assessment warns that developing, quote, malicious cyber actors have begun testing the capabilities of AI-developed malware and AI-assisted software development, technologies that have the potential to enable larger scale, faster, efficient, and more evasive cyber attacks against targets including pipelines, railways, and other U.S. critical infrastructure, end quote. This is extremely concerning. As complex as these threats are, our nation's efforts to combat them will be even more challenging if our adversaries lead in AI research, development, and innovation. For these reasons, it is important for Congress, DHS, and the private sector to work together to ensure that we remain at the forefront of AI innovation while safeguarding our national security, economic competitiveness, and civil liberties. Today, we will hear from a panel of experts who will provide insights into the current state of AI for Homeland Security and the steps that we can take to trust that the AI we use will be secure. To our witnesses, thank you for being here today, for your efforts to educate members of this committee and the American people on how we can responsibly advance AI innovation. I look forward to your testimony. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to our witnesses. I'd like to thank you for holding this important hearing on the intersection of artificial intelligence and Homeland Security. Artificial intelligence is not new. The Department of Homeland Security and its components have a long history of trying to understand how to most appropriately leverage the capacity AI provides. The release of ChatGPT in November 2022 made clear AI's transformative potential, and it accelerated efforts by the administration and Congress to ensure the United States continue to lead the world on the responsible development and the use of AI. As we consider how to deploy AI to better secure the homeland, we must keep three critical principles in mind. First, we must ensure that AI models we use and the data to train them do not reinforce existing biases. That requires that AI used by the government be developed pursuant to specific policies designed to eliminate bias and is tested and retested to ensure it is not having that effect. Eliminating bias from AI also requires a diverse AI workforce comprised of people from a variety of backgrounds who can identify potential biases and prevent biases from being encoded into the models. Second, the government must rigorously assess appropriate use cases for AI and ensure that the deployment of AI will not jeopardize the civil rights, civil liberties, or privacies of the public. Law enforcement and national security agencies in particular must implement an exacting review of potential infringements on those fundamental democratic principles. Moreover, it is essential that the workforce be included in decision-making processes on how AI will be deployed. The workforce is in the best position to understand capability gaps and where AI can be effective. AI is also a tool the workforce will use to carry out their jobs more effectively. It is not and should not ever be a replacement for people. Finally, the AI tools we use must be secure. In many respects, existing cybersecurity principles can be adopted to secure AI. I commend the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, commonly called CISA, for working with the private sector to ensure the adoption of secure by design principles in the development of AI. Moving forward, we must determine vulnerabilities unique to AI and work together to address them. I commend President Biden on last year's executive order on AI, which put the federal government on the path of developing and deploying AI in a manner consistent with these principles. As DHS continues to assess how it will use AI to carry out its vast mission set, from cybersecurity to disaster response to aviation security, I'm confident that it will do so in a manner that incorporates feedback from the workforce and protects civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy. We cannot allow our optimism about the benefits of AI to short circuit how we evaluate this new technology. At the end of the day, bad technology is bad for security. As we consider the potential benefits AI present for DHS's mission, we must also consider the new threats it proposes. AI in the hands of our adversaries can jeopardize the security of federal and critical infrastructure networks, as well as the integrity of our elections. We know that China, Russia, and Iran have spent the past 4 years honing their abilities to influence our elections, sow discord among the American public, and undermine confidence in our election results. Advances in AI will only make their job easier, so we must redouble our efforts to identify manipulated content and empower the public to identify malicious foreign influence operations. I look forward to a robust conversation about how the Department of Homeland Security can use AI strategically to carry out its mission more effectively. I look forward to the witnesses' testimony, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I want to thank the ranking member for his comments. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today, and I ask that our witnesses please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Troy Demmer is the co-founder and Chief Product Officer of Gecko Robotics, a company combining advanced robotics and AI-powered software to help ensure the availability, reliability, and sustainability of critical infrastructure. Today, Gecko's innovative climbing robots capture data from the real world that was never before accessible, from pipelines, ship hulls, missile silos, and other critical asset types. Gecko's AI-driven software platform then enables human experts to contextualize that data and translate it into operational improvements. Mr. Michael Sikorski is Palo Alto Networks Unit 42's Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Engineering. He has over 20 years of experience working on high-profile incidents and leading research and development teams, including at Mandiant and National Security Agency. Mr. Sikorski is also an adjunct assistant professor for computer science at Columbia University. Mr. Ajay Amlani, how do you pronounce your name, sir?
Ajay Amlani.
Ajay Amlani, got it. Thank you. Currently serves as the president and head of the Americans for iProov, a global provider of biometric authentication products used for online enrollment and verification. In addition, he's a well-recognized identity technology expert serving as a strategic advisor for industry leaders working in artificial intelligence, identity technology, and e-commerce. Mr. Jake Laperruque is the deputy director of the Center for Democracy and Technology Security and Surveillance Project. Prior to joining CDT, Jake worked as senior counsel at the Constitution Project, the Project on Government Oversight. He also previously served as a program fellow of the Open Technology Institute and law clerk at the Senate Subcommittee on Privacy, Technology, and the Law. Again, I thank our witnesses for being here, and I now recognize Mr. Demmer for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. My name is Troy Demmer, and I am the co-founder of Gecko Robotics, a Pittsburgh-based technology company that uses robots, software, and AI to change how we understand the health and integrity of physical infrastructure. Back in 2013, Gecko started with a problem. A power plant near where my co-founder and I went to college had to keep shutting down due to critical assets failing. The problem was obvious from the first meeting. with the plant manager. They had almost no data. The data that had been collected was collected very manually with a gauge reader and a single point and sensor measurement. Furthermore, that data was often collected by workers working off of ropes at elevated heights or in confined spaces, resulting in few measurement readings. That meant the power plant had to make reactive decisions rather than being proactive. That was the genesis of the idea behind Gecko, using rapid technological advances in robotics, software, and AI to get better data and generate better outcomes. We do this by building wall-climbing robots armed with various sensor payloads that can gather 1,000x more data at 10 times the speed compared to traditional methods. We also have a software platform that takes that data and combines it with other data sets to build a first-order understanding of the health of critical infrastructure. Where are the vulnerabilities? What do we need to do to be proactive before fixing it before a problem occurs? And how do we prevent catastrophic disasters? Those are the problems Gecko is solving today for some of the most critical infrastructure that protects the American way of life. We're helping the Navy reduce their maintenance backlog and build the next generation of military equipment smarter. We're helping the U.S. Air Force create the digital baseline for the largest infrastructure program since the Eisenhower Interstate Highway Project. And we're working with various other critical public and commercial infrastructure projects across the country. In every one of these cases, the missing link is the data. And that brings us to the conversation we're having in today's hearing. AI models are only as good as the inputs they are trained on. Trustworthy AI requires trustworthy data inputs that are auditable, interrogatable, data inputs that provide the complete and undiluted answer to questions we are asking. When it comes to our critical infrastructure that powers the American way of life and protects our homeland, those data inputs, for the most part, do not exist. And without better data, even the most sophisticated AI models will be at best ineffective and at worst harmful. Yet the way America collects data on infrastructure today hasn't fundamentally changed in 50 years. Today, despite advances in data collection technologies like robots, drones, fixed sensors, and smart probes that can detect corrosion through layers of concrete, we are still largely gathering data manually, even on our most critical infrastructure like dams, pipelines, bridges, power plants, railroads, and even military assets. To give you one example from our work, we have one major national security partner who collects data on critical assets both manually and with our robots. Their manual process, collected by handheld sensors and skateboards, creates 3,000 individual data points. Our robots on that same asset collect more than 8 million. That more than 2,600 times the data that multiplies the power of AI models and their predictive value, that's the scale and of the difference between new technology-driven processes and manual processes that we still largely rely on to secure our critical infrastructure. Without better data collection, AI will never meet its potential to secure the critical infrastructure that protects our homeland and the American way of life. As I conclude, I want to touch briefly on how we think about robotics and AI in the workforce construct. At Gecko, we talk a lot about upskilling the workforce. That's a big priority for many of our partners. We've responded by hiring a significant number of former manual inspector workers and then training them to operate our robots. More than 20% of our employees don't have 4-year degrees. Workers who once hung from ropes at dangerous heights are now operating robots. Workers who built their careers inspecting assets are now helping our software developers build the tools to make that work better. Thank you again for the opportunity to join you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Demmer. I now recognize Mr. Sikorski for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the critical role that artificial intelligence plays in enhancing cybersecurity defenses and securing the homeland. My name is Michael Sikorski, and I am the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Engineering for Unit 42, which is the Threat Intelligence and Incident Response Division of Palo Alto Networks. For those not familiar with Palo Alto Networks, we are an American headquartered company founded in 2005 that has since become the global cybersecurity leader. We support 95 of the Fortune 100, the US federal government, critical infrastructure operators, and a wide range of state and local partners. This means that we have deep and broad visibility into the cyber threat landscape. We are committed to being trusted national security partners with the federal government. As my written testimony outlines, AI is central to realizing this commitment. We encourage everyone to embrace AI's transformative impact for cyber defense. A reality of today's threat landscape is that adversaries are growing increasingly sophisticated, and AI will further amplify the scale and speed of their attacks. However, this fact only heightens the importance of maximizing the substantial benefits that AI offers for cyber defense. The AI impact for cyber defense is already very significant. By leveraging precision AI, each day, Palo Alto Networks detects 2.3 million unique attacks that were not present the day before. This process of continuous discovery and analysis allows threat detection to stay ahead of the adversary, blocking 11.3 billion total attacks each day and remediating cloud threats 20 times faster. The bottom line is that AI makes security data actionable for cyber defenders, giving them real-time visibility across their digital enterprises and the ability to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber attacks quickly. Accordingly, Palo Alto Networks firmly believes that to stop the bad guys from winning, we must aggressively leverage AI for cyber defense. My written testimony highlights a compelling use case of AI-powered cybersecurity that is showing notable results, up-leveling and modernizing the Security Operations Center, also known as the SOC. For too long, the cybersecurity community's most precious resources, our people, have been inundated with alerts to triage manually. This creates an inefficient game of whack-a-mole, while critical alerts are missed and vulnerabilities remain exposed. We have seen transformative results from customer use of AI-powered SOCs. This includes the following: a reduction of mean time to respond from 2 to 3 days down to under 2 hours, a 5 times increase in incident closeout rates, and a 4 times increase in the amount of security data ingested and analyzed each day. Outcomes like these are necessary to stop threat actors before they can encrypt systems or steal sensitive information. And none of this would be possible without AI. This new AI-infused world we live in also necessitates what we like to call secure AI by design. Organizations will need to, 1, secure every step of the AI application development lifecycle and supply chain. 2, protect AI data from unauthorized access and leakage at all times. And 3, oversee employee AI usage to ensure compliance with internal policies. These principles are aligned with and based on the security concepts already included in the NIST AI Risk Management Framework and should be promoted for ecosystem-wide benefit. Now, the issues we're discussing today are important to me also on a personal level. I'm honored to have spent decades both as a cybersecurity practitioner partnering with governments to stop threats and as an educator training the cyber workforce of tomorrow. It's with that background that I can say confidently that Homeland Security, national security, and critical infrastructure resilience are being enhanced by AI-powered cyber defense as we speak. And we must keep the pedal to the metal because our adversaries are certainly not, sitting on their hands. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions and continuing this important conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Sikorski. I now recognize Mr. Amlani for his 5 minutes of opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, and members of the committee. My name is Ajay Amlani, and I've been building innovative solutions to help organizations assure people's identities for the last 20 years. I serve as President, Head of Americas at iProov. I started my federal service as a White House Fellow and Senior Policy Advisor to Secretary Tom Ridge, the first Secretary of Homeland Security, in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. At a time in which the federal government was rethinking how to manage its national security missions. And a large part of that included finding new ways to benefit from the innovation happening in the private sector. For the past 20 years, I have forged partnerships with the federal government and the commercial sector that facilitate the utilization of commercial technology to augment national security initiatives. Today, this committee is considering how to harness the power of AI as part of a multi-layered defense against our adversaries. To best answer that question, we need to start with understanding how AI enables threat actors. What capabilities can DHS and its component agencies develop to combat these threats? What actions can the department take to better work with industry as it promotes standards for AI adoption? AI exponentially increases the capabilities and the speed to deploy new fraud and cyber attacks on the homeland. They enable new threat technology developers to dramatically shorten their innovation cycles. Ultimately, AI technologies are unique in the way that they upskill threat actors. The actors themselves no longer have to be sophisticated. AI is democratizing the threat landscape by providing any aspiring cybercriminal easy-to-use advanced tools capable of achieving sophisticated outcomes. The crime-as-a-service dark web is very affordable. The only way to combat AI-based attacks is to harness the power of AI in our cybersecurity strategies. At iProov, we developed AI-powered biometric solutions to answer a fundamental question. How can we be sure of someone's identity? iProov is trusted by governments and financial institutions globally to combat cybercrime by verifying that an individual is not only the right person, but also a real person. Our technology is monitored and enhanced by an internal team of scientists specialized in computer vision, deep learning, and other AI-focused technologies. Novel attacks are identified, investigated, and triaged in real time, and technology enhancements are continuous. This combination of human experts and AI technology is indispensable to harness AI in defending and securing the homeland. But equally important is the need for AI-based security technologies to be inclusive and uphold privacy mandates by design. DHS and its component agencies have prioritized transparency and accountability, including performing routine self-assessments and collecting public input on matters of privacy protection and limitations on data use. Those actions serve as a great model for how DHS and other agencies should treat AI capabilities, both in regulating and promoting AI adoption. The US government has used biometrics in a growing number of programs over the past decade to improve operational efficiency and traveler experience. With Gen AI, biometrics take on an expanded role of helping to ensure that someone is who they claim to be in digital ecosystems. For example, deepfakes and synthetic identities have recently become so realistic that they are imperceivable to the human eye. Because of this, biometric verification plays a critical role in the nation's security posture. To best assist DHS and its components, Congress should support the creation of more useful standards for systems and testing, and give access to the best talent developing new technology tools with the agility necessary to respond to the changing threat landscape. The Silicon Valley Innovation Program is a very powerful model for both acquiring the expertise of the nation's best engineering minds while also creating a collaborative testbed for proving new technologies. iProov has worked with S&T in all phases of the SVIP program and can testify firsthand to the powerful impact that this program could have if expanded to scale with a broader group of stakeholders. Another example, the Maryland Biometric Test Facility, could be expanded upon to incorporate a wider range of perspectives as biometric technologies work to address future threats. In conclusion, we at iProov are completely focused on pioneering capabilities which can counter identity fraud while collaborating with federal stakeholders to advance innovation. We seek to play a constructive role in AI practices and hope the committee will see us as a resource as you consider a path forward. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Amlani. I now recognize Mr. Laperruque for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, and members of the House Homeland Security Committee, thank you for inviting me to testify on the important topic of artificial intelligence and how it can ensure that its use aids America's national security as well as our values as a democracy. I'm Jake Laperruque, Deputy Director of the Security and Surveillance Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology. CDT is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that defends civil rights and civil liberties in the digital age. We've worked for nearly 3 decades to ensure that rapid technological advances, such as AI, promote our core values as a democratic society. AI technology can only provide security if they are used in a responsible manner and, as Chairman Green said, treated with appropriate nuance. This is not only critical for keeping America safe, it is also necessary for protecting our constitutional values. Today, I'd like to offer a set of principles for the responsible use of AI, as well as policy recommendations to promote such use in national security space. We must be wary that for AI technologies, garbage in will lead to garbage out. Too often AI is treated as a sorcerer's stone that can turn lead into gold. But in reality, AI only performs as well as the data that it is given. Reckless deployment of AI technologies, such as using input data that is low quality or well beyond the bounds of what any given system was designed to analyze, will yield bad results. In the national security space, this could have dire consequences: wasted resources, leading investigations astray, or triggering false alarms that leave genuine threats unattended to. Ensuring that AI is used responsibly is also critical to protecting our values as a democracy. AI is often framed as an arms race, especially in terms of national security, but we must take care in what we're racing towards. Authoritarian regimes in China, Russia, and Iran have shown how AI technologies such as facial recognition can throttle dissent, oppress marginalized groups, and supercharge surveillance. The United States must not use AI so callously. Truly winning the AI arms race does not simply mean the fastest build-up on the broadest scale. It requires uses that uphold civil rights and civil liberties. As Ranking Member Thompson highlighted, responsible use requires exercising care from creation to input of data into AI systems to the use of the results from those systems. To facilitate responsible use, government applications of AI should be centered on the following principles. AI should be built upon proper training data. It should be subject to independent testing. It should be deployed within the parameters that the technology was designed for. It should be used by specially trained staff and corroborated by human review. It should be subject to strong internal governance mechanisms. It should be bound by safeguards to protect constitutional values. And it should be regulated by institutional mechanisms for transparency and oversight. Although the degree of secrecy in national security programs will make upholding these principles especially challenging, we can and must find ways of promoting responsible use of AI. CDT proposes 2 policies in furtherance of this goal. First, Congress should establish an oversight board for the use of AI in national security contexts. This board will be a bipartisan, independent entity within the executive branch, with members and staff given access to all use of AI within the national security sphere. The board would act as an overseer within classified settings to promote responsible use of AI. So this would support both compliance with existing rules as well as lead to improved practices. The board's role would also allow for greater public knowledge and engagement. This would serve as a conduit for harnessing outside expertise and building public trust in government's ongoing use of AI. The Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board has demonstrated how effective this model can be. That board's role in counterterrorism oversight has enhanced public awareness and improved public policy in a manner that's aided both security and civil liberties alike. A new board focused on the use of AI in the national security realm would be similarly beneficial. Second, Congress should enact requirements to enhance transparency for the use of AI. This should include required declassification review of key documents, such as AI impact assessments and privacy impact assessments. It should also require annual public reporting and information such as the full set of AI technologies that agencies deploy, the number of individuals who are impacted by their use, and the nature of that impact. While we support prompt adoption of these important measures, AI technologies are far too wide-ranging and complex to be solved by a silver bullet. Promoting responsible use of AI will require continual review, engagement, and adaptation. This work should be done in consultation with a broad set of stakeholders, impact communities, and experts. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Amlani, in the evolution of AI, would you discuss your perception or opinion on whether or not you think, as the threat evolves, we're evolving ahead of the threat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. This is a very important component of the work that we do at iProov. At iProov, we have a central operations center where we monitor all the threats happening globally. We have deployments worldwide: Singapore, UK, Australia, Latin America, Africa, and the United States. And we're constantly using our human people there with PhDs to be able to assess the threats that are actually trying to attack biometric systems globally. We're migrating and adapting our AI technology to stay multiple steps ahead of the adversary. And I think this is very critical as we look at AI technology to be able to build in steps to continue to stay multiple steps ahead of the adversaries and understanding what attacks are actually happening globally so that we can continue to modify our systems.
Well, thank you for that, and I'm glad to hear that. It makes everybody sigh a little bit, or relief. But you know, I want to shift the subject a little bit because we're talking about AI as a tool and as a you know, all the positives and then the challenges of it when it's on the attack side. But I want to ask something about workforce. You know, what do we need to do uniquely? And this, Mr. Sikorski, would really, I think, be for you, since you know your company employs a very large number of individuals in this fight. You know, how do we need to be thinking about developing the workforce for AI as well as cybersecurity in itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Congressman. I think it's super imperative. Myself, I've trained cyber agents for the FBI at Quantico, Department of Energy employees, private companies, and then I've been teaching at the university level for over a decade. And firsthand, I've seen that we really need to focus in as AI, cybersecurity, it's here to stay, and we need to really make strides to continue to push down, get people trained up, our workforce, our children, get them learning these concepts very early on is super important. And then from a Palo Alto Networks perspective, we're very invested in this as well. So as far as the Unit 42 team goes within Palo Alto Networks, we have what's called the Unit 42 Academy, which takes undergraduates, gives them internships during the college years, hands-on training. Then they come to work with us as a class, like a cohort, where they learn a lot of up-leveling skills, and their first year is spent just engaged in learning and growing. And I'm proud to say that 80% of the Unit 42 Academy in the last year was actually made up of women.
Do me a favor and let's go just a little bit more granular on this question. What are the skills, specific skills that these individuals need to have? What are we teaching them? I get, you know, the coding and all that stuff, but what specifically do you need to see in a candidate that you would want to hire?
Yeah, so number one is having a background in understanding how to engage these technologies. We've spent a lot of time building technologies over the last 10, 20 years in the cybersecurity industry. So knowledge of how they work, what they give them access to, and how they can leverage them to fight against you know, evil that's coming into these networks. I also think about things like understanding of how computer forensics works, malware analysis, an ability to really dive deep into the technical details so that they could dig out and sift through the noise. And it also comes into play with AI. Do they have an understanding of AI and how it is being leveraged in the product to sift through that noise for them? Because one thing we deal with heavily is these analysts are inundated with just too many alerts from all these products firing. And in those alerts is what the actual bad stuff that's happening. And so by leveraging AI, you sift through that noise, bubbles up things for them to actually dive deep into what's really there.
And the essential is the AI is now fighting the AI, basically, right? I mean, the machines are fighting the machines. Am I getting this right? To put it in simplest terms?
I think to some extent, I think there's definitely that kind of thing going on for sure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the cyber analyst is being up-leveled in their ability to fight back.
Yeah, we've got to figure out, we've got some legislation coming out pretty soon on workforce development, and I want to just make sure that the AI piece is captured in that. So thank you. My time has expired. I now recognize the ranking member for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the things that we've become accustomed to is if we're filling out something online, as we complete it, they want to figure out if you're a robot or if you're a human. And so you got to figure out now, is this a bus or is this a car or is this a light? So all of us are kind of trying to figure this out. So you gentlemen have given us some comfort that there are some things out here, but let me just give you a hypothetical question. As we look at this, how do you see the role of government as IO AI develops, and what do we need to do to ensure the public that that development does not allow our adversaries to become even more our enemy than what it is. We'll start with Mr. Demmer.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, for the question. I agree the country needs to prioritize building AI that is safe. With the executive order, where I stand is that we need to collect highly accurate data that ultimately informs these models. And increasingly, what I think can be done is to help create test beds for helping to validate those models and creating the training data sets that enable good AI to be created, leveraging only good data sets. And so that's my position.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think of is my history in cybersecurity. We rushed as innovators to get the internet out, and we didn't build that while thinking about security, and look at the spot we're in. I think that's why it's really important that we build AI and have it secure by design. And it's one of these things where it falls into a few different categories, making sure that the AI that we're building, everybody's rushing to get this technology into their products and out to consumers, but we need to think about it as we build it. For example, what is the application development lifecycle? What is the supply chain of that being built, and is that secure? Thinking about these things as they're running in real time. How are we protecting those applications so that they don't get manipulated? How about the models we're building? How about the data? Is that subject to manipulation? How are we protecting that? And then how do we monitor it? How do we monitor our employees that are all probably using this today without even our knowledge? Mm-hmm. So those are all areas where I would focus.
In addition, when building the internet, identity was actually not a layer that was originally thought about. So the challenge that you just described about the changes of buses, I just encountered seaplanes versus normal planes. And it's very difficult to try to decipher between what's a seaplane and a normal plane in terms of a CAPTCHA. That's the field it's called. Standards and testing is a very important component here. I think we need to continue and constantly test all the tools to make sure that they're inclusive and making sure that they're accurate. Standards are another important component here that comes out of testing, but is also very focused on leveraging and organizations like NIST and continuing to invest in organizations like NIST. Talent development is the other component that I would heavily focus on, and much of that resides in the private sector and partnerships with private sector companies. At Defense Innovation Unit, we surveyed the top 25 engineering schools about where they wanted to work after they graduated, and there was no government agency other than NASA on that whole list. There was no defense or a government contractor on that whole list other than SpaceX. And so as we start to think about this, how do we actually get access to the top engineers across society? And that is actually through partnerships with the commercial world. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo several of what's been said already. We need well-trained systems. We need high standards for procurement to make sure that we're using good systems. We need proper data inputs to be going into AI systems and proper treatment of what's coming out with human review. I would also emphasize that beating our adversaries in this field means that we do not end up imitating our adversaries. Right now, facial recognition, as an example, I've already harped on, that is used in a frightening way in regimes like China, Russia, Iran. Right now, federally, we do not have any regulations on law enforcement use of facial recognition, and although the cases are limited, there are documented cases of it being used against peaceful protesters in the United States. That's a type of standard that we should be prohibiting.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, maybe I'll submit for the record. We have elections coming up in November. The last time there was some involvement by Russia, China, specifically, with our elections. Are you in a position to say whether or not we are robust enough to defend against our adversaries for elections, or are you to encourage us to be a little more attentive to any aspect of our elections?
That's a great question. I think that certainly generative AI makes it easier for malicious actors to actually come after us in that way. We've actually already seen them in the cyber arena start to build more efficient phishing emails. So things like typos, grammar mistakes, all of that kind of stuff that's a thing of the past. That won't be something we encounter anymore.
In other words, it won't be any more typos.
Right, and so and they could also read someone's inbox and then talk like that individual, right? They could leverage it in that way. I do think that CISA, we're a member of the JCDC, and they're taking, election security is a big priority for them. And so, we're assisting in those ways. And I think that it's definitely super concerning and something we need to lean into with the election cycle coming up.
Anyone else want to address that?
Good question. I'll let the gentleman's time continue. Anybody else wants to answer?
I think from an identity perspective, this also is very important with regards to who is it that's actually posting online and being able to discuss. So from an identity perspective, making sure that it's the right person, it's a real person that's actually posting and communicating, and making sure that that person is in fact right there at that time is a very, very important component to make sure that we know who it is that's actually generating content online. There is no identity layer to the internet currently today. We have a lot of work that's being done on digital credentials here in the United States. Our country is one of the only in the Western world that doesn't have a digital identity strategy. We had some work that's actually been done in the National Cybersecurity Strategy, Section 4.5, but it hasn't really been expanded upon. And I think that's some work that we should think about encountering and doing.
Yeah, if I may, I have some questions on that too that I might submit in writing, because this digital identification thing is, as banking and all of that goes into the wallet on the phone, this digital ID is a critical issue. So I'll send some questions too. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I now recognize Mr. Higgins, a gentleman from Louisiana, for his 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've worked extensively with my colleagues on the House Oversight Committee regarding artificial intelligence, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the emerging technology. Even if I were, it'd be like opposing the incoming tide of the ocean. It's happening. I think it's important that Congress provides a framework so that AI cannot be leveraged in any manner that's contrary to Americans' individual liberties, rights, and freedoms. I introduced the Transparent Automated Governance Act, the TAG Act, as a first step to set limits on government application of artificial intelligence. As a whole, the bill seeks to ensure federal agencies notify individuals when they're interacting with or subject to decisions made using AI or other automated systems, and directs federal agencies to establish a human review appeal process to ensure that human beings have supervision of AI-generated decisions that could impact the lives of Americans, and specifically our freedoms. So I have concerns about this tech, but we may as well embrace it, because there's, I think it's crucial that America lead in the emergence of AI technologies and how it interfaces with our daily lives. And may I say, we could have hours and hours of discussion about this, but I have 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask you, gentlemen, regarding the use of AI as it could contribute towards more effective counterintelligence or criminal investigations, as those criminal investigations and counterintelligence efforts relate to Homeland Security. I'm trying to focus in on this committee, our committee here, and our responsibilities. What are your thoughts, gentlemen, on how we can best deploy AI with our existing law enforcement endeavors for border security and criminal investigations that result from our effort to secure and resecure our border? Mr. Sikorski, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing I look towards is the way we're already leveraging AI for cyber defenses. As I spoke about in my statement, we've been taking really large amounts of data and distilling it into very few actionable items that a human
You
can
say taking large amounts of data. Where are you getting that data from?
So for us as a cybersecurity company, we are focused on processing security data, which means ones and zeros, the malware that is found on the systems, the vulnerability enumeration of those systems, low-level operating system information that now enables us to like tease out what's the actual threat, which is very distinct from.
So you're drawing your raw data from open sources and from, like, how are you accessing the raw data that you're analyzing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So some of the data that we're getting is from, the customer collection that we have in our products that are spread throughout the world, telemetry, low-level information.
From the Fortune 100, you said your company works with 95 of the top 100.
That's right.
Okay, so those companies have agreements with their users. That's that part that we don't read. As it comes up on your phone and you renew the agreement and nobody reads it, we go to the bottom and click yes. So in the 95 companies, there's agreements to share that data. You're using that to analyze through AI for the purposes of what?
Yeah, that in order to find new attacks. So one of the things we're doing is it's firewall data, network level telemetry, host system level telemetry. This is very different than, say personal information or something like that. And instead, we're focused on that lower level data, bringing that together and then leveraging AI to say, how is that network attack related to what's happening on the actual computer? Bringing that together quickly so that the analyst can find the threat and eliminate it very quickly.
And you're specifically referring to cybersecurity, but Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I have many questions I'm going to submit to these gentlemen in writing, and thank you for convening this hearing. It's very important.
Absolutely, thank you. I now recognize Mr. Carter, the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
5 minutes.
And thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. Advancements in AI technology, as it demands for its use, possesses significant challenges. We must mitigate the associated risks and threats by leveraging AI to improve our national security. I urge my colleagues to support my bill, H.R. 8348, the CISA Securing A1 Task Force Act, which proposes the creation of a dedicated task force within CISA. This task force will focus on addressing safety, security, and accountability challenges posed by AI. Today's discussion is crucial for the American people as we work to tackle these pressing issues. AI is not new. We know that. It's relatively new to the general public, and some of its applications have enormous value. Some of them can be quite frightening. National security, obviously, is major. So I'd like to ask each of you to take a crack at answering the questions relative to civil rights, civil liberties, and privacies in general for the American people. How is this contemplated as we develop further delving into AI? Mr. Demmer?
Well, I defer to my fellow witnesses on this issue, given their expertise, but it is certainly worth a spirited conversation about how we balance national security and civil liberties. What I can say is Gecko is focused on building the data sets on the most critical infrastructure in a way that promotes national security.
So I'm a cybersecurity practitioner, as I said, so I'm not, don't know all the ins and outs of the policy itself. But my sense is that when we think about AI and regulation, we got to think of the purpose. So defining what is high risk, right? And then saying, what are the AI use cases that are actually high risk and focusing on the unique security requirements for them. on the cybersecurity side, I think that security data, those ones and zeros I was talking about earlier, are a little bit not high risk compared to a lot of other technologies that are being rolled out.
At iProov, we take inclusivity by design very seriously. We do regular self-assessments on our own technology. We work with every single independent assessment organization that's out there. We're encouraging more independent assessment organizations. We're encouraging them to stay ahead of the technology. Many times these independent organizations focus on threats or challenges in the past. We need to stay up to speed. We need to stay above and go beyond. We build inclusivity by design, as I mentioned. That includes obviously skin tone, but also cognitive and physical capabilities, making sure that those are taken into consideration in inclusivity. Socioeconomic class as well. Many technology tools are expensive to be able to attain. I just got the iPhone 15 Pro, and I can attest to that. Age is also a very important component, as well as gender. And so making sure that all of those different characteristics of inclusivity are also embedded into the design of AI is an extremely important component of success.
So there certainly is a range. Some systems, like for example, damage assessment systems that DHS uses present lower risks, maybe no real risks to civil rights and civil liberties. Other technologies such as facial recognition, mobile device analytics, or automated targeting systems, all of which DHS employs, present very significant risks to civil rights and civil liberties. The OMB memorandum on AI puts a good stress on care for civil rights and civil liberties. We hope that's a good step towards development of strong internal guidelines within agencies. But this is an area where transparency and oversight are essential to evaluating the effectiveness of those rules, evaluating whether more steps are needed, and as necessary, prompting Congress to step in and make their own rules. As I mentioned, in the field of facial recognition, there's no current federal laws or regulations for law enforcement use. We think that's something that needs to change.
So the information out is only as good as the information in. So the data becomes paramount. So how do we take into account cultural nuances, natural biases, so that we're not replicating biases that humans have and then become a part of the bias that's in AI? Mr. Amlani?
At iProov, we have a worldwide deployment. And so we operate in Singapore, we operate in Australia, in the UK, in South Africa, in many African countries, as well as Latin American countries, as well as North America. We take very careful consideration of basically making sure that we're seeing all of the threats coming in from all of those locations, but also taking into account all of the data and making sure that we have a representative database that we train on. We go over and above when it comes to making sure that our training data is in fact representative of an overall population. And I would encourage you to be able to include standards and testing and invest in those to make sure that other providers are also doing the same.
So from our standpoint, obviously, as you've heard from the questions here, you'll continue to hear that Congress has real concern on making sure that we learn from the mistakes may not be the right word, but we learn from how fast the internet came, Facebook, Instagram, and all of those things, and they're constantly bringing about new challenges, the good, the bad, and the ugly. How do we learn from that to make sure that we are managing this AI as it unfolds and becomes more prevalent in our society? And I realize that my time has expired, so Mr. Chairman, if you would allow them to answer that, I will yield.
The gentleman can answer the question.
Sure. That's directed at me, I assume.
Yes, or anyone else who cares to take a crack at it.
Thank you, Congressman. Staying on top of all of the different technologies is very important, and making sure that we have independent organizations within the federal government that can have different companies submit their AI to testing, and making sure that we have the right people staffed within those organizations who can stay on top of all of the latest opportunities and threats in the market. Yes, there is a lot of interest that this overall industry has in making sure that basically it's well-represented databases and common standards that we can all adhere to. And I think making sure that those accurate solutions can be in front of the customers for biometric verification is also a very important component. Biometric verification is also something that's very different than biometric recognition. And I want to make sure that we can call out the two differences between the two.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair has been flexible and generous with time, but I ask all members to watch the clock. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. As we've seen the incredible growth of AI, we know that that AI can be used to gather and analyze data. We know that AI has both offensive and defensive capabilities, and with all technology, that AI can be used for good and evil. But specifically, as we drill down today on Homeland Security and looking at the role that AI is playing in Homeland Security, I think it's easy for many of us to see the role that AI plays in cybersecurity. And we've heard testimony about the offensive and defensive capabilities of AI in the cyber world. But I want to talk a little bit about the role that AI may play in securing our physical borders. One of the things that this committee has been focused on is trying to secure our southwest border. We know that last year there were 3.2 million encounters on the southwest border, a record number of encounters that we're on track to break that record again this year. We know from statements that the Secretary of Homeland Security has been reported that he's made that 85% of those individuals encountered are at some point released into the interior. And so my question is, how can we use AI to better identify the individuals that are being encountered? Because I have a great fear that we are not identifying and properly vetting those individuals before they are released into the interior. I know, and I'll start with you, Mr. Amlani, you talk a little bit in your written testimony about biometrics and the use of biometrics and the Maryland biometrics test and their facility and the things that y'all are doing. So I would ask maybe first if you could start off, and then if anyone else would like to join in, how can we within the Department of Homeland Security better use AI to identify the numerous individuals that we are encountering on a daily basis along the southwest border so that we're not allowing people into the country that would cause ill will. People who may have criminal records, criminal backgrounds. We see people all the time who are apprehended that they may have a tie to some sort of terrorist organization, or individuals who have previously been arrested and convicted of violent crimes in other countries. And so how can we use AI to better vet those individuals, to do so in a more timely fashion before they're released? And so I'll start with you, allow you to kick that off, and then would ask anyone else who would like to join in to please continue in this discussion.
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. This is a very important question in my mind. We at iProov obviously cannot speak on behalf of DHS, but I can speak on behalf of my experience in 2003 at the Department of Homeland Security, originally launching new technologies like biometrics at the border. Secretary Tom Ridge did assess biometrics as one of the core technologies to be able to improve the department's capabilities, improving throughput, as well as being able to improve security at the same time. My personal experience with biometrics was actually introduced to me first in 2003, U.S. Visit program, when it was rolled out at airports for the first time. For people coming into the country that were not citizens, we actually used fingerprint technology at the borders, and it was very eye-opening for me, for people walking up to a Customs and Border Patrol agent who had a look of fear in their eyes, about to be asked a significant set of intrusive questions and disclosing a lot of private information, who then put their fingerprint down on the device, and to have the Customs and Border Patrol agent say, "Welcome to the United States." That sole interaction for me was something that lit a fire within me over the last 20 years to recognize that this was not just a security tool and a capability that was focused on law enforcement, but actually a tool for consumers to be able to allow themselves to be able to protect their own privacy and have better experiences.
Anyone else like to add in? Yes, sir.
I would just add that this is, I think, a very good example of how input data, what you're putting into a system, and the quality can make such a difference. in biometrics and facial recognition fields, a photo that is done good lighting, close up, clean profile, such as a DMV photo or a photo during processing and booking, that is much more likely to yield accurate results than, say, if you're taking something in the field from a distance. If I just took my smartphone and tried to click a picture of you now, or if someone was taking a photo at night. So it's, I think, a prime example of when you're talking about something like during processing, why those different situations can make such a difference about whether AI is reliable or not. It really is highly situational.
With either our other two witnesses, I'll give both of you an opportunity before I yield back if anyone would like to add to the discussion. Mr. Chairman, I'm over time, so I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ivey, is recognized for 5 minutes for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And to my Republican colleagues, if you'll relay to Chairman Green my appreciation for having this hearing. I think this is an outstanding topic for us. In fact, we might even need to have additional hearings on this topic because the time goes so quickly. But thanks again for having it. And to Mr. Amlani, welcome from Maryland. I represent Prince George's County. You're just outside of our district. Hopefully when that lease comes up, we can convince you to move a little further south, but we'll take it one step at a time. I did want to ask the whack-a-mole question to you, Mr. Sikorski, because that's something I've been kind of worrying about quite a bit. We've identified a lot of threats, and the challenge, I think, is that sometimes they can replicate very quickly, faster than certainly a litigation approach can remedy those. Let's take the deep fake types of imagery. We've had some of those pop up. Sometimes they're aimed at embarrassing individuals, sometimes, revenge porn kind of things. So since I don't know that litigation is fast enough to do it, and I think you mentioned that your company's taken some steps to try and deal with that moving forward, I'd like to hear a little bit more about it. But in addition to that, how can the government create incentives for the private sector to do more on that front? And to, because I think it might have been the ranking member mentioned, we've got AI fighting AI. I think that's going to be better than the government fighting AI, or certainly the courts. How can we go about it in a way that allows us to keep pace?
Yeah, that's a great question, Congressman. I think there's some things that are already happening that are really great with the government. A few things that I'm actually pretty passionate about myself, things like collaborative defense. So back when I worked for the NSA, you didn't tell anybody you worked there. Now there's a cyber collaboration center that reaches out to industry and realizes that we can go much further with defending the nation if we work together versus in complete and utter silos. And so continued push, like we've seen with CISA and the JCDC, for example, has been very successful and is moving the needle. So pushing hard on that front, I think, is imperative. I also think that it's important to think about cyber hygiene and what entities are doing. So companies that are out there, how are they protecting themselves? I think CISA offers a great range of cyber hygiene and vulnerability scanning services, for example, which is great. But one thing we lack somewhat is, like, what's the report card on how efficient somebody's cybersecurity is, especially when you talk about critical infrastructure, healthcare, and so forth. So maybe we should roll out metrics that we could actually track over time, like mean time to detect, mean time to respond. How quickly are we actually responding to attacks and sifting through all that noise?
All right, and I want to monitor my time, but just to follow up, if you could respond in writing perhaps, but the Unit 42 Academy was very interesting to me. I was wondering how that might be replicated. Perhaps are there ways that the government could encourage other private entities or colleges and universities that might be willing to do it, but find ways to expand that effort too. And the too many alerts point that you made earlier is another one I'd like to find out a little bit more about. With respect to talent development, I appreciate the fact that there's efforts going on, and Mr. Sikorski, I think your company mentioned it, and Mr. Amlani, I think you did as well. And I think that's going to be a good solution for the intermediate and long term. In the short run, I think we're importing a lot of the talent. And in some instances, we've had people come and testify before this committee that they're coming from hostile states, frankly. And so one of the things that I'm wondering about, since the government monitors it to some extent on the way in through the, the immigration process, which has its challenges for sure, even with respect to these types. But the other is, once these guys get in and they go to these companies, how do we know that the company's doing a good job of monitoring these individuals to make sure that they're staying on the right track, they're not misusing their position, there's no economic espionage going on? Should we be confident that these companies are doing a good enough job to make sure that the United States is protected and that their industries are protected from those sorts of potential attacks? And I apologize to the chair for running up to the line, but I appreciate the chair's indulgence on this. Anyone who'd like to answer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I've been doing incident response for almost 20 years, and it varies. It's not just nation state threats. It's not just ransomware. Another big threat is insider. We see insider threats when Unit 42 is responding, where, it's not just the threat of them maybe putting something into the supply chain and getting it out the door and that kind of threat, which we know nation states are embedding employees in that way. But also we've seen where they go out the door and then they have stolen data and then they start engaging in ransomware-like behavior, especially if their country doesn't have the ability to make money and is has their economy cut off. So those are just some ideas I had.
Anyone else? Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield back.
Yeah, of course, and I appreciate it. I did see your kind words when I was out in the lobby section out there, so I appreciate that. And I will tell you that I think, honestly, and I would ask members for feedback on this, we need more of, the 5 minutes in a hearing room just aren't getting it, right? So what I may do is have like a town hall type thing where we're the town hall and they're on and we're just asking questions, and it's more, I think that would be more informative, and maybe some presentations, so to speak, on data poisoning for AI and all that kind of stuff, and then us understanding a little better to ask more informed questions. So thank you for saying that. Work with me, and we'll get some more stuff on the books for this.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
I now recognize Mr. Ezell, the gentleman from Mississippi, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today and helping us out here. This is something that we all are concerned about, and we appreciate you being here today. The capabilities of AI are quickly advancing. This product, which when I look at it feels futuristic, holds the power to significantly improve the way we work and go about our daily lives. However, we also know that advancements in technology create new opportunities for bad actors to operate effectively. I agree Congress must be closely monitoring this powerful tool to ensure the application is not misused. But the government cannot get in the way of American leaders in this sector and their ability to improve the product. The Chinese Communist Party has intense ambitions to win the AI race. As I talk with people in the private sector, it's clear we're in a global AI arms race. Our adversaries are innovating quickly, and it's critical that we do not restrict the capabilities of American business. I'd like to just direct this to the entire panel. How can we ensure America's leadership in AI, and what government actions could jeopardize this? So start with anybody who wants to answer.
Thank you so much for the question. This is a really critically important point for me. I think continuing to stay ahead of our adversaries on technology requires both investment in our talent and workforce. I just took my 15-year-old son on college visits, and I can tell you it's actually very difficult to be able to get into an engineering university today. I think that there's an unprecedented demand for people wanting to study AI and wanting to study cybersecurity and wanting to study other types of engineering that are being left out of the workforce, that are at the college stage. They get intimidated by software engineering. and being able to make that a part of the high school curriculum leading into college, I think will also help, and then creating more educational opportunities for individuals wanting to be able to get into the workforce and learn those skills, not just at the college age, but also going forward as they are progressing through their careers. In particular, investing in companies and making sure that we are actually hiring companies that have the best talent is another component. Those companies themselves can recruit the best talent. They provide entrepreneurial worlds that allow individuals to be able to create and solve problems in settings that are fun environments to be able to do that. And I think if we can actually make a concerted effort through organizations like the Silicon Valley Innovation Program to hire the right companies to be able to solve some of our massive government problems is an important component to stay ahead.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to say anything?
I would say that encouraging, whether it's via procurement, other incentives, responsible development of tools and proper use of those tools is key, and making sure that we're not simply trying to barrel ahead with reckless development or reckless applications. That's not going to yield good results. As I said before, winning the AI arms race doesn't just mean the fastest and broadest buildup, it means the most efficient and effective one. It's also, I think, a matter of looking at our values. When we look at countries like China, Russia, et cetera, it is a deployment of AI that is draconian in nature and that has supported those authoritarian regimes. So I think it's important that we be not just a global leader in innovation, but a global leader in values in this space, and making sure that that when we're promoting the use of AI, we're promoting a use that is in conjunction with democratic values.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sikorski, China limits its citizens' access to information through censorship, and I assume they'll continue these restrictions on AI. How does America's freedom and the capitalist economy help to attract global investment around AI?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that one way that we do is just by that fact we're a little bit more open with regards to how we're able to innovate and in what regard we're able to innovate. I think as sort of putting that together with your previous question, I think about, what is the high-risk AI models we're building that are impactful to our citizens? Things like maybe somebody applying for credit or for a university, right? Those kinds of things are high risk and maybe something we should need to hunker down on as far as, how are they being built up? Versus on the cybersecurity side, I think the risk is a lot different, and therefore, really pouring in a ton of innovation, which we're doing in industry, and we see organizations like CISA doing. And so us coming together with the government to really iterate fast and thinking about the charge of how do we sift through the noise, which I've talked about a few times, of all of this security alerts and actually make sense of it to find, the next big attack.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. And thank you all again.
Gentleman yields. Now, as chairman, I'll take a privilege here just a second, shamelessly plug the academic institutions in Tennessee. The University of Vanderbilt University just hired General Nakasone, to come lead cyber, and the University of Memphis, University of Tennessee are doing some exceptional research with Oak Ridge and Redstone, and of course, Tennessee Tech, one of our engineering programs. Your son should check that one out too. An outstanding, they go out to high schools and middle schools, and they're starting cyber at a very early age. Great schools in Tennessee. Sorry, I just had to do that, guys. I now recognize Mr. Magaziner for 5 minutes of questioning. He snuck in on you. I'm sorry, but he's... Mr. Thanadar, I'm sorry, I looked at the nameplate. You're in...
Well, my name is Sri Thanadar. I represent Michigan and Detroit. And my question is for Mr. Sikorski. You mentioned in your testimony the need to secure every step of AI app development lifecycle. As we saw with the SolarWinds hack, a supply chain vulnerability can have far-reaching consequences. Can you speak in more details about what steps Palo Alto Networks takes to minimize supply chain vulnerabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I was heavily involved and actually led the team that reverse engineered the SolarWinds backdoor, which was pretty exciting to get to brief Homeland Security about that as we were unboxing it. I think about that is one of the biggest concerns we have when we think about cyber threats is the supply chain attack. We've seen there's been numerous other examples since SolarWinds, which is now a few years in the past, where our adversaries are able to get into that supply chain, deploy code, and then it gets shipped out to customers, which then essentially gives them a backdoor into networks. At Palo Alto Networks, we're really focused on thinking about how to eliminate that as you're building your code and as you're shipping out your products. So as I mentioned, there's sort of different tiers that we're thinking about when it comes to AI security. But one of the biggest is absolutely supply chain, because people are very quickly to develop this. They're pulling in technologies that are out there on the internet or otherwise, and that makes a really good opportunity for an adversary to slip something in. And so we adopt technologies and are really focused our AI on eliminating those threats.
Thank you. And can you elaborate on what shortfalls the AI industry has demonstrated when it comes to securing AI app development life cycles?
I'm sorry, what was that? The horn is...
Can you elaborate on what shortfalls the AI industry has demonstrated when it comes to securing AI app development life cycles?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think of is, when we're rushing out new technologies, we're often not taking the time because, often what happens is there's companies that are pitted against each other to who can get this AI technology out to their customers first will win the industry. Like, that's what we're talking about, because of how fast AI development is working. And we've all talked about how much it's going to evolve our life over time, and it's inevitable. And I think that when you do that, people end up rushing, doing things and cutting corners to get those technologies out, not thinking about security. Shocker, that's the thing we dealt with a lot of innovation over time. And I think that making sure that we're actually putting in mechanisms to think through what is people's security posture? Are they doing the right things as they're shipping out applications? Because to a large extent, software development in our country is a national security issue when we talk about the supply chain.
Okay. And this is a question for the whole panel. The world has not yet seen a major AI-driven cyber attack. On the scale of attacks like NotPetya or WannaCry, what is the likelihood that we see an attack on this scale or worse in the next 5 years? Anybody?
I'll take that one as well, as a cybersecurity guy. So one thing I think about is that is an absolute threat and huge concern I have, because we saw ransomware spread like wildfire, take down systems with NotPetya, like you mentioned. The shipping industry was impacted with that, and I remember seeing grocery stores for one of the big changes completely knocked out. People couldn't even buy groceries. And then I also think about my experience with SolarWinds and the fact that just imagine that Russia was using AI in that attack. They would have been able to focus more on getting their hooks into systems for which the SolarWinds attack gave them access. And if they could have done that in an automated way, rather than using their human army, it would have been much more of an efficient attack.
All right. Anybody else? Thank you. Yeah.
I would just say it's a serious challenge because it's a type of scenario where AI can be the weapon or it could be the target. So as we've discussed a bit here, it might be something that's used to facilitate a phishing attempt. You could use something like a deep fake to augment a phishing attempt. Maybe instead of just sending an email, then you get a fake call, voice message, or even a video saying, oh, open up that email I just sent you. That makes someone less suspicious and helps facilitate that. It's also potentially a target point. Critical infrastructure, they use lots of AI systems in ways that might not at all be related to national security, but if there's a vulnerability there, or there's some sort of manipulation of AI systems, then that could also be a vulnerability point. Maybe perhaps how we might use AI to distribute power along the grid, or how we use it to check to people coming into a stadium or large-scale event. if those AI systems and the algorithms behind them were a target of an attack or subject to manipulation that could raise a host of risks.
Thank you so much, and Mr. Chair, I'll take my own seat next time. So sorry for
So
the
you don't
confusion.
confuse me, yeah, that got it. Poison to the data there. Thank you, and sorry I got your name wrong. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's an important discussion. I'm glad we're having it. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. The public-private partnership that we have throughout the United States between government, including Department of Homeland Security and other agencies, and then private industry, including, and I think importantly, critical infrastructure. I don't know that it's ever been as important as it is today. And so I thank the witnesses for being here because I think the goal is for us to be able to keep up. One of the ways that we can keep up and one of the ways that we can continue to train the next generation is actually happening in my hometown at Angelo State University. They are a cyber center of excellence. They are a Hispanic serving institution. I think that's very important. It's a very rural area, but they also have a very strong focus in addition to just general cyber issues on AI. In San Angelo, we have Goodfellow Air Force Base, which is a joint intelligence training base. And so you pair these up together, you've got university work being done, you have the military that trains our intel professionals, a majority of them train at that location. And so I want to put a plug in there for that, and I may ask some questions on that, but let me go to Mr. Sikorski. In your testimony, you talk about how adversaries are leveraging AI, and I'd just kind of like to get your, whether it's phishing or some other older technique or whether it's a new technique, maybe talk to me about how you see adversaries increasing the scope, the scale, and actually the threat using AI.
Yeah, it's a great question, Congressman. I think that, it goes to the question earlier, right? Like the what if some of the attacks we've seen in the past leveraged AI in a large scale attack. I also think about the evolution, right? So the first thing that the attackers went, and we're monitoring them, one of the things Unit 42 does is threat intelligence, so we're monitoring the dark web. We're seeing what they're talking about in their forums, what they're selling to each other, the access to networks, but also talking about how to leverage this technology to create really efficient attacks. The big focus so far has been on social engineering attacks, which means things like phishing, which we talked about, get you to click on something you wouldn't otherwise, and then also manipulate you to get like multi-factor authentication, where you need that extra token to log in. They're really focusing there as well. Where we start to see them, poking around is using AI to be able to do better reconnaissance on the networks they're attacking, to know, what holes are in networks across the world. And then also they're starting to wade into how can they develop malware efficiently and variations of it so that it's not the same attack you see over and over again, which goes back to the point of how do you fight against that, which is you need to develop technologies that are really efficient using AI to see those variations.
I want to ask all of you in the last 2 minutes to speak to this, this model that Angelo State University is using, where they're training students. And those students may go into the NSA, they may go into the military, they may go, in the private sector. What should Angelo State and other universities be doing? We'll start with Mr. Laperruque and then go down. We've got about a minute and a half.
I'm not a hard science person, so I probably have less data than my colleagues, but I would just say I think I found in my field it's invaluable for people in the policy space like me to learn from the people who understand the tech and people who are developing the tech to learn from people who are experienced in policy, experience in protecting civil rights, civil liberties, and values. It helps with sort of how we can translate across to each other, and also helps as you're designing these systems to think about what's the best way to do it and how we can actually do it in a way that's going to promote what we care about as a society.
Thank you. Mr. Amlani.
I think, first of all, actually there's a vocabulary around cybersecurity that is a very important component to be able to educate our youth on. Everything from spear phishing, you mentioned all the other types of attacks. I think these are important things to be able to teach people about, to make sure that they themselves are not hacked, but also they understand what the attacks are actually happening and how to guard against them. Identity is a big component of all cyber attacks. It's about 91% of all cyber attacks are actually originated with a credential that's been stolen, that's been hacked, that's been compromised in some way, shape, or form. And then malware gets implanted within a system that can then be activated afterwards on an ongoing basis. And so having better identification mechanisms to make sure that individuals don't have to change their password every day. They don't have to have multiple things that are very hard to remember.
Would you say that the universities should be researching this, that they should be doing it in maybe even a classified setting, that they should be working on these types of techniques and partnering with government agencies as well?
Government agencies as well as commercial sector, yes.
Okay, very good. My time has expired. I'm sorry, Mr. Demmer, I didn't get a chance to talk to you, but I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Swazi, I think Mr. Menendez has asked that you go ahead of him, and so you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for doing this hearing. I'm very interested in the idea of you doing some sort of off-site retreat to delve into this in more depth. Thank you to the witnesses. When I listen to you and I think more and more about AI, the more terrified I become, quite frankly. I know there's great opportunities, but I'm scared. In 1974, I was in 7th grade, and I remember Sister Ruth at St. Patrick's grade school saying, you know, technology's moving so fast these days that we don't have a chance to figure out how it's affecting us, how it's affecting our values, how it's affecting our families, how it's affecting our society, how it's affecting, it's just moving too fast. And that was, you know, because of the space race and Atari had just come out with Pong in 1972 or something. So, you know, think about how fast everything's moving now. And, you know, think of all the impacts we've seen from social media on our young people, where these polls come out and say, you know, 35% of kids are patriotic, whereas, you know, for boomers like me, it's 70-something%. Nobody believes in any religion anymore, or any institutions. And we have all these kids with mental health issues related to their self-esteem. So everything's moving so quickly, and I'm confident that you're going to figure out how to protect, as Mr. Sikorski talked about, he represents 90 of the Fortune 500. And we're going to fight our way through to protect our businesses, to make sure that they're looking out for their security and interest. And hopefully we'll think of more things with our government. But I'm worried about our kids. I'm worried about our senior citizens getting scammed. I'm worried about people using our voices to say things we didn't say. I'm worried about our society that's so divided, and our foreign adversaries, Chinese Communist Party, Russia, Iran, trying to divide us more by using social media and our freedom, and certainly using, I think, AI and deepfakes to try and divide us even more. So I'm worried about this divisiveness. I'm worried about fraud. So I'm going to give you the rest of my time, and I'm going to ask each one of you. You talked about values, Mr. Laperruque. I'm worried about the values in our country, just like people that believe in our values. Forget about the fact that there are other countries that don't believe in our values at all. I'm worried about our own country and our values and promoting those values. So each of you, just give me 30 seconds each, if you can. What's the number one thing on the big picture you think we need to be focused on right now to address not the positive parts of AI, but the scary parts of AI? So what's number one on your mind? Mr. Laperruque, you go first.
I would say it has to be a comprehensive approach from the creation of systems to input of data and inputting in proper situations to retrieval and use of results. And that's something that there have to be a lot of factors to bring together in the national security space because it's so often veiled in secrecy. That means we have to find mechanisms for transparency and oversight, because you don't typically have that sort of light that you can shine on potentially in the private sector and business practices or even other parts of government. So I think we have to find ways to promote that oversight, making sure that we're upholding those principles for responsible use, even when you don't always have the same level of public insight.
So oversight to watch the input of data?
Oversight and everything from procurement to what data is being input to how you're using data, what kind of human review and corroboration you have, how much you rely on it. It has to be.
That sounds awfully big effort. Okay, Mr. Amlani?
I mean, as a father of 3 children, all of whom use digital tools regularly, I think, first off, we're placing a large responsibility on parents to be able to monitor the digital communications of our children. There aren't the age verification mechanisms currently today to be able to provide a gateway to make sure that the right people are accessing the right systems at any point in time. I think it goes back to the identity layer of the internet that I mentioned before. As you mentioned, there's all kinds of online bullying, extremism, recruiting, other things like that that are happening online. and it's all being done, not just in the dark web, but actually out in the open. But it's because we don't have the ability to be able to properly recognize who people are online, and it creates mechanisms and difficulties for making sure that we can actually have stronger values enforced and allow parents to be empowered.
Okay, better IDing people. Mr. Sikorski?
Yeah, I agree with both those takes so far, but the other one that I would consider and put out there is the education piece. So I talked heavily already about cyber education and the workforce that's going to defend the nation next as being paramount, but there's also an education piece for the rest of society when it comes to security and AI and disinformation, right? And knowing that what you're seeing on your phone may or may not be real, right? And people in an age where people are getting their news by just scrolling through their phone second after second, I think that's something that really needs to be considered. And then how do we eliminate those kinds of things that are not real?
Mr. Chairman, could we let Mr. Demmer answer? He hasn't been able to answer a question for a while. Go ahead, Mr. Demmer.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I agree with you on the societal and technological advancements, creating some downstream maybe impacts that are unintended. I personally believe that technology advancement that is happening today creates a promising future for all workers to be able to upskill, have more fulfillment in their work, and to be enabled with these tools and technologies. But it all starts with the critical data. If we don't have good data going into these systems, then garbage in, garbage out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the chairman of the Cyber Subcommittee, Mr. Garbarino, for 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all the witnesses for being here. My colleague just before was talking about 1974 and Sister Ruth, and I was like, where was I? No, wait, I wasn't alive. 1984, though. Yeah. Mr. Demmer, recently, one of our biggest concerns has been the repositioning of Chinese state actors in U.S. critical infrastructure, meaning they are postured for a cyber attack if conflict with the United States were to arise. The U.S. intelligence community has said that AI has been helping them detect this activity, given it is much more challenging to decipher than traditional tactics that involve malware injection. How have you been thinking about this challenge?
Absolutely. So the threats are dual. There's the cyber threats that I think, there's others on this witness stand that can best answer that. On the physical infrastructure, specifically our critical assets, is a vulnerability. And we've seen that. Gecko is a proven partner for the U.S. industrial base, both public and private sector. And we need to ensure, energy security, critical infrastructure like roadways, bridges, dams. These are all susceptible to physical attacks. And ultimately, creating wins for the industrial base enables us to fight some of these other existential threats as well.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Mr. Sikorski, I understand that you teach cybersecurity at Columbia University, which undoubtedly means that you have a front row seat at our nation's cyber talent, up-and-coming cyber talent. In your view, what does the government need to do to bring sufficient numbers of people into the cyber workforce?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think back to my experience, right? When I was in school, it wasn't until I was a senior in college in New York City and 9/11 happened that I was like, I want to go work for the NSA. Like, that's what I want to go do. And, but I didn't really think about that before. It was things like video games and stuff like that, right? And I think getting people excited earlier on is a really good place that we can focus, right? Of like, there's cybersecurity hacking clubs like at universities and high schools, and this gets people really excited to gamify it and play along. So I think, while we look at the workforce gap, I think as Palo Alto Networks goes, I already mentioned our workforce capability where we have like the Unit 42 Academy, we're bringing people in and who don't maybe have the hands-on experience. We're giving it to them with on-the-job training. And then I also think about government programs. Like when I went to the NSA, I was in a technical development program there where I got ramped up on all the things that I didn't learn during my education previous to that. So those types of programs that are feeders, I think, are really powerful in getting people to level up the skills that maybe they didn't get during college.
So that was actually, you jumped, or pretty much already answered my second question. How does, well, not technically, not all the way. You have these clubs, you have these feeder organizations. What's Congress's role in further improving those? Or do we have a role? I mean, how do we, because it's, over 500,000 jobs, cyber jobs and openings in the US. I mean, that's what keeps me up at night, that we don't have the workforce to defend against these cyber attacks. So, and AI can only bring us so far. We still need that human element. So do we have a role, and what is it if you've thought that far?
Yeah, I think absolutely do. I think there's an ability to create these types of programs, right, where it makes it really easy for people to apply and get into, to the point made earlier about, hey, it's hard to get into schools that have these programs available. And I think we often think that, oh, well, it needs to be a very specific cyber program that they're doing. Some of it is they could learn those types of skills on the job when they get in, and it's more about building out the broad base of technical capability in our workforce. And I think that that's one great area. I do think that there's a lot of government agencies like CISA that have information out there where people can learn and train up. I think there's a lot of virtual education kinds of things going on that are very powerful. So I think just thinking about how to drag in that workforce, and some of that is even earlier on, right? So we're talking sometimes giving people skills. And I remember when I taught the FBI, it was like all of a sudden these people were cyber agents and they had none of the background in cyber. And right, they know technical computer science background, and it was really challenging. So it's not just a snap your fingers, train them up in a month. Yeah. It starts earlier.
Yeah, and I think I'm out of time, but companies, I think, need to start focusing on skills-based hiring instead of degree-based hiring. I think that'll help too. But Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the congressman who represents Palo Alto, I think. Yeah. Mr. Swalwell, for 5 minutes.
Great. And Chair, thanks for holding this hearing. It's so important.
Absolutely.
And I think we're at our best as a committee when we're taking on issues like this. And I've enjoyed working with the gentleman from Long Island, Mr. Garbarino, on the Cyber Committee. I think we're doing a lot of good work there. Mr. Laperruque, I was hoping to talk to you a little bit about something that Californians are very concerned about, and creatives everywhere. The entertainment industry is the second largest jobs engine in California, and it's not just folks who are on screen, it's folks who are writers, editors, a part of the production teams off screen. And AI, certainly, it's the future. There's no ignoring it, there's no putting it back in the bottle. It's the future, and so we have to embrace it, we have to shape it, put guardrails on it and contours around it. But when it comes to the creative community, the example over the weekend of what happened to Scarlett Johansson with her voice essentially being stolen from her for an AI product, what should we be thinking about to make sure that we protect artists and creators from this, but still, as I said, embrace AI and recognize that this is where we're going?
Well, I think it's going to be important that we find ways to sort of try to be proactive in anticipating what people's rights are going to need to be. I mean, a situation like that, probably not something that was even imagined or contemplated when the movie where she played in AI, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, came out. And this is something that's come up a lot, I think, in the recent, the writer's strike, the actor's strike, is how do we build in those protections now, not just for how AI is being used right now in this industry, but also how's it going to be used in 5 years? How's it going to be used in 10 years? So, looking at workers' rights is a little outside of my field, but from just the technology standpoint, it moves so fast. I think it's important to be proactive in thinking about not just current risks and factors to care about, but what do we need to care about down the line that we might not be ready for when it comes up.
And when you talk to creatives, they're not opposed to AI, and that's such a basic hot take, which is, oh, they oppose AI. They don't oppose AI. They just want rights, and they want, and they're willing to engage around their likeness and their voices, but they should be compensated. And the majority of people who are writers and actors are people you've never heard of, but this is their livelihood. And in California, we're especially sensitive to that. I wanted to ask Mr. Amlani, because we're in the same backyard, in the Bay Area, and the chairman alluded, that our tech culture has created, so many opportunities in the Bay Area. But I do worry about with AI, and I have a community in my district called Pleasanton. It's one of the wealthiest communities in America, and you've heard of it. I have other places in my district like San Lorenzo and Hayward and Union City, and they have some of the poorest communities in the country with schools that don't have enough resources, and those kids have dreams as big as kids in Pleasanton. And so I just fear that at a child's earliest days in schools, that there's going to be two classes created: those who are given access to AI in their classrooms and those who are not. And so what can the private sector do, because you're often really some of the best solutions out there, to partner with school districts to make sure that you're imparting your knowledge and skills on places that need it most, recognizing that you're going to have a need to recruit talent down the track as well?
Sure, thank you so much for the comments and questions. Congressman, obviously this is a pretty personal issue with me, but I think with regards to actually allowing people to have access to the technology and AI in particular, it's interesting the way that AI is actually democratizing itself and it's making itself available to everybody. It's as much of a concern to make sure that actually everyone has access to it and is actually able to have these tools, but also people that have gone through large universities and master's degrees and PhDs, now a lot of that content and knowledge is available at people's fingertips who have never gone through any of those programs. And so, with different AI tools that are now available at people's fingertips, you can now code, you can now write apps, you can now create content. I've got my 12-year-old creating music right now. This type of democratization of the AI capabilities is both an opportunity, but also a massive threat. It really does upskill many cyber criminals around the globe to be able to attack systems, people that are not as well off potentially and would love to have the ability to be able to create malware that could potentially create a ransom payment. And so those types of opportunities to be able to educate the youth and make sure that they know how to use it responsibly and for the right aspects are something that I think our society needs to embrace and do a lot more of.
Great, thanks. Thanks again, Chairman.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. D'Esposito, the gentleman from New York, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking the committee in this direction. I think that it is an issue that really affects every corner of the United States of America and obviously our world, and has real promises for the future. Just last week during Police Week, I chaired an Emergency Management and Technology Subcommittee hearing with the Law Enforcement and Intelligence Subcommittee hearing about the use of drones in the first responder world. And we heard a lot about the expanding field and how law enforcement agencies are utilizing drones to assist them in doing their job. And I have to say, as someone who spent a career in the NYPD, it was good to hear and promising that they're embracing technology about how to handle the issues that are plaguing so many cities across this country. Obviously, as we embrace technology and as the field expands, we meet challenges and we find challenges. So listening to all of you speak about the power of AI to assist the United States from attacks from our enemies, it seems that there may be a space for AI in these drones. So generally speaking, any of you could answer, is AI already being used in drones either by those in law enforcement, the government, or privately?
Congressman, thank you for the question. Being in a related field with doing wall climbing robots primarily, I can say that AI is useful for using these smart tools properly. Everything from localizing data, ensuring that the data point is synced to the location on a real-world asset, to processing millions of data points, or in this case, visual images. We heard a little bit earlier, drones being used as well to secure the border. So there are definitely applications here for that.
Yeah, and you mentioned data, so obviously drones are utilized by law enforcement to collect that data, whether it's audio, visual, location data, GPS. among others. So that information that's collected needs to, we need to make sure that it's collected correctly and obviously kept private. So is there a role that AI can play in ensuring that this information remains secure and doesn't give the bad guys access?
Absolutely, and I defer to my fellow witnesses here on specific policy recommendations for cybersecurity. But Gecko collects data, massive amounts of information on the physical built world, and we take very seriously the responsibility of securing that data, following requirements like NIST 800-171 and NIST 800-172 for these standards of securing the data, and also providing training to the entire workforce so that they know how to properly handle any type of information, or classified information.
Any of the other witnesses have recommendations with regards to that?
Yeah, I could just add that, securing the models, the data that's used to build them is critical. One of the things we deal with the most when doing incident response, especially, ransomware attacks have actually shifted. They don't no longer encrypt files on disk anymore. They just focus on stealing data and then use that to extort victims. And so securing the crown jewels of data, which is what most entities have, is paramount.
During the, I'm sorry, Mr. Amlani, did you have something? Sure.
This is at Defense Innovation Unit for the Autonomous Systems portfolio. Part of my role years ago was actually to manage autonomous systems within drones. And I think one of the biggest concerns is actually Chinese-made technology within drones, and making sure that we create a list of different drones that people could potentially use in law enforcement and other avenues to make sure that we have a safe list of drones, and which is something that Defense Innovation actually did create.
So that's actually, you're leading into my next question. It was almost like we planned this. So part of the conversation that we had last week from the NYPD was the fact that they currently utilize Chinese technology in their drones, and they're working to eliminate them from the fleet because of the issues and the concerns that we have. And my colleague from New York, Ms. Stefanik, has introduced legislation recently that would help law enforcement make sure that they only purchase American-made technology, American-made drones. But obviously, those Chinese drones are still in our atmosphere, still being utilized by first responder and law enforcement agencies. So just quickly, how can AI help us mitigate the threats that they pose?
There's also a significant amount of work being done by Defense Innovation Unit and other agencies on mitigation of drones and counter-drone work. So AI use for counter-drone work is also another way to be able to mitigate those.
Excellent. My time's expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from California, from Los Angeles, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here as well. It's truly amazing how fast AI has evolved and continues to evolve every day. And it used to be something, of course, a lot of us would read about or see in movies and read about in science fiction novels, and that's changed so much. And just the progress of AI in just the last 6 months to a year has been startling, but also I think shows the promise of what AI can actually do in our lives and how it can also improve our lives as Americans and as a world. I, like a lot of folks here, there's concerns as it relates to our own security, our own homeland security challenges we have here in this country. But I also want to focus on the challenges it faces to our own democracy and our elections process. A lot of my colleagues have brought that up in the past, and there's bills to address that, of course, here in the Congress as well. Just in the last 24 hours, DHS issued a warning ahead of the 2024 elections of threats that AI poses to our very elections. Earlier this year, the World Economic Forum announced that AI threatens and continues to threaten global democracy, not just here in the US, but across the globe. And this assessment was actually echoed just last week by our own intelligence community. The DNI intelligence officials have testified in the Senate that since 2016, when Russia first tried to meddle in our elections, that the threats are happening from foreign actors even more so as we know today. Russia, China, Iran, others competing to influence not just their own countries, but what's happening in our own elections here in the US. And that's actually a very danger to all of us and a concern for us as well. Now, this past January, we know that voters in New Hampshire were exposed to one of the most high-profile recent cases of AI. We know that there was a robocall, for example, impersonating President Joe Biden, telling people not to vote. That attempt, of course, was identified, stopped, and investigated, which I think we're all very grateful for. But we can see that those types of efforts could cause enormous havoc, especially in elections that were close, that were targeted in states or in communities across the country. We already know that there's been unsuccessful and successful attempts to undermine our elections in 2016 and 2020, and folks are trying to do it again in 2024. And so the rise of AI, deepfakes, and other technology is very concerning, I think, to the Congress and to all of us. I'm also especially concerned because one of both the advantages in the US is that we have our elections are decentralized. Our elections are not run generally by the federal government. They're run by states, counties, towns, cities, oftentimes small communities without a lot of resources or the technology to know how to actually deal with kind of the oncoming, I think, wave of AI attempts to actually meddle in all these elections. And so I'm really concerned about how these smaller agencies, these city clerks, actually are able to take on AI and have the resources to do so. We know there's a new DHS Artificial Intelligence Task Force, which coming out of Homeland Security, which I think is really important. But this is a huge, I think, responsibility of this committee, is how we provide and get assistance to these clerks and county recorders across the country. Mr. Laperruque, I know that the CDT has done a good deal of examining some of these risks. What additional safeguards do you think need to be put in place as it relates to this election piece? And how can Congress better support all of these election organizations and officials across the country that have a decentralized system, and how are they supposed to get support? That's, I think, very concerning.
As you're emphasizing, the decentralized natures of our elections, which in some ways provides a lot of assets, is also a significant challenge when you're facing threats like this. So we, fortunately, over the last decade, have built up a robust network of federal entities that provide support for election security from things such as cyber threats. I think we should supplement that by having those same entities serve as means for highlighting AI threats, whether that's of a specific type of attack or misinformation campaign that's going around using that to disseminate information, but also for more general awareness and education that can be brought from that small set of federal entities and disseminated outwards to that broad network, trying to educate about here are the types of AI technologies, here's how they might be used for everything from trying to use AI to create spam FOIA requests to overload your office, to building up fake materials about polling information, to using AI for spear phishing.
And because also just finally, I think even though we have our elections obviously for president or U.S. senator, these are federal elections, but they rely on data from local towns and counties and registrars that just send their information and their voting information up through the process through the state, and then eventually, of course, the states will certify elections. And so the real concern is that you can micro-target, of course, precincts, you can micro-target small towns and cities with these AI disruptions that can have real impacts in certain states to presidential elections. And I think that's something that I think we have to really consider and think about as we move forward, and how we get these small towns and city clerks the technology, but also the education that's needed to take on these deepfakes and AI concerns. So with that, I yield. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes questioning.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sikorski. I would like to go back to your testimony where you mentioned that our cyber adversaries are utilizing AI to really enable some of their malicious behavior, like creating more sophisticated phishing attacks, finding new attack vectors, enhancing the speed of lateral movements once they do intrude upon a network. I'm interested in hearing more about how we are using machine learning to build and enhance our cyber defenses against these kinds of attacks. You mentioned in your written testimony precision AI, some other tools, including some revisions to how the SOCs are operating. Would you elaborate for us on how machine learning can enhance our cyber defenses?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, Palo Alto Networks and myself have both been involved on this machine learning AI journey for for over 10 years. This isn't, while ChatGPT and other technologies like that have gotten really popular really quick, we've been leveraging that type of technology for quite some time. Myself specifically on malware, anti-malware technology to be able to detect malware on a system. And so we've been training models to do that. We've been for quite some time. And that detects sort of variation in what we're seeing and making sure that variants of malware that come out will be stopped due to that training. Then there's also the idea of sort of leveraging AI to get rid of the noise. And that's really the more recent evolution that we've been focused on at Palo Alto Networks, where we're trying to say, everybody's inundated with all these tools. I go back to the SolarWinds example. I did numerous incident responses to that after that came out, went on to corporate networks, and one of the big problems that they had was they actually detected the attack. They detected the malware being dropped on a system. They detected the lateral movement, but they didn't know it was there because they were flooded with so much noise. And so what we're doing is we're taking our technology and very much focusing on how to put these alerts together, reduce the amount of information so that the brains of the analysts, who, by the way, are getting burned out by having to look at so much data that makes no sense to them, instead it gives them a chance to zero in on the attack, figure it all out, and then actually move the needle.
You also mentioned in your testimony at a point about the unintended consequences of disclosure, and I'd like to go back to that. Particularly raise a concern that public disclosures that require information about how we are using AI to train and defend networks, that requiring disclosures of a certain type could unintentionally create a roadmap for the cyber adversaries and reduce our overall security. I'm interested, if you were a policymaker, how would you balance disclosure requirements with not alerting our adversaries to the type of information that we don't want them to have?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I think about, it's all about what is your end goal with respect to the AI that you're trying to get to customers or to protect a network? I think you got to think about the risk level involved there and think about the trade-off, right? The more that we regulate things and think about what's there and really put a lot of pressure on oversight, it could slow down the innovation and the protection. I think it's the appropriate thing to do when we're talking about somebody applying for a home loan or something like that, thinking about every step of the security process with that. I think when we start to talk about cybersecurity, we got to focus on what is the data. And is the data the ones and zeros, the malware, the detections to be able to eliminate attacks, and how important that is to make sure that we continue to make a difference with the technologies that we're building on the cyber war that we're all out there fighting day in and day out.
You also mentioned, that reminds me of the concept of secure by design. Is that something, I know it's something that we need to be contemplating as we analyze internally what to regulate and in what manner. Share with us, if you would, a little bit more about secure by design and what that should mean to us as federal policymakers.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point that AI is here to stay no matter what any of us do, right? Like it's coming, and it's sort of like the internet, right? But we didn't plan security into the internet. We didn't plan security into all of the applications and everything that was built out. And instead, what we're stuck doing, and especially comes up as a cybersecurity company, is, we missed out on an opportunity to build things in a secure way. And that's where, when it comes to securing AI by design, you think about, what are you building? How are you building it? What are you pulling in from the supply chain into that build? How are you protecting the application as it's running? How are you protecting the models, the data, everything as it's actually flowing out to customers or otherwise? And I think that's where a really big focus on building things in a secure way is really important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. I now recognize Mr. Menendez for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member, for having us here today. Thank you to all the witnesses. I first want to start and build off some of the questions that my colleagues have asked about training our cybersecurity workforce. And first want to acknowledge Hudson County Community College, which is New Jersey's 8th Congressional District. It is designated as a National Center of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity by the NSA. and they were recently awarded $600,000 to expand their renowned cybersecurity program, which is getting more women into the cybersecurity field. So incredibly proud of the work that they're doing. Mr. Sikorski, thank you for emphasizing the need to educate and train our cyber workforce. I'm wondering, in your experience, what are you seeing as the most prominent barriers to participation in the cyber workforce?
I think there's a few parts to that. I think the first is desire. I think that getting people at a much younger age, focused on getting excited about these technologies and wanting to get involved in what's happening. And it goes back to what we discussed earlier, which is how do we make sure they have proper access and actually are talking about AI and cybersecurity at a very, very early age. And then I think back to the point of what's happening in your district is very focused on how do we build the university system such that they're really feeding the engine of all of these cybersecurity workforce shortage jobs that we need to actually fill. So I think, and working with industry to make sure that they're lining up for the jobs, because, a lot of cybersecurity companies actually struggle to find talent to hire into these jobs, which go into, securing networks around the world, collaborating with CISA and other things that we're doing, and there's just not enough people to pull from there.
Yeah, because across public-private sectors, everyone's looking to enhance their cybersecurity capabilities, which includes adding cybersecurity professionals, whether it's the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, or whether it's a private entity that is concerned about these issues. Just sort of quickly following back, you mentioned a desire at a younger age for people to engage in this field. I believe you're an advisor to Columbia's cyber student organization. Are you seeing anything sort of in that student demographic that draws them to cyber that maybe we should be sort of using to highlight and amplify at a younger age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one thing I think about is the gamification of it.
Yeah.
And I think of myself personally, I wanted to be a video game programmer originally because that was really cool back in the Nintendo days, right? And I had the tech skills for it. But then once I realized that cybersecurity is like this good versus evil kind of situation going on in the real world, and it's only going to get bigger, I started to get really excited. And then there's hacking competitions and driving that into getting people to participate more because of the fun that can be had and the team building that can be had working towards that. That doesn't really exist out there, but that's what actually happens. At Columbia University, there's a cybersecurity club where they focus on that. They go to competitions together, and it rallies them into a common goal. And I think those types of things are great.
That's great. I appreciate it. I'm going to shift real quick to Mr. Demmer. In your written testimony, you touch on how AI can be used to better secure physical infrastructure. And you specifically note the collection of high quantity data. I also sit on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. We're overseeing the major investment that's being utilized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is building our future infrastructure. I was a commissioner at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. One of my favorite projects was Restore the George, where they went through and cables, and it was a completely intricate project, but necessary. As we think about investing in our infrastructure so we don't have to make these huge investments of replacing our existing infrastructure, how could the use of AI and the data collection that you touch on be used to better upkeep our existing infrastructure?
Thank you, Congressman. This is something we care deeply about. Of course, protecting the infrastructure we have today, capturing the right data sets so that we can ensure that they are here for us when we need them, not vulnerable to just where old age or some external threat. But increasingly, we also see the opportunity with these data sets to help us build more intelligently in the future. So as we bring new systems online, how do we instrument them in ways where we can do that modernization and telemetry of what's going on with that equipment so that we don't have sort of the failures or the vulnerabilities and hopefully lower that cost of maintenance, because 2/3 of the cost of critical infrastructure is usually consumed after the initial build.
That's right. And what type of dollar amount investment could the federal government make to quickly scale up this technology and put it to use?
Yeah, so there are very much technology-ready solutions out there for national security, and there are ways that I'd love to follow up with some guidance on that in terms of programs that could be utilized to help bring those technologies to the forefront and accelerate the adoption of them, whether it be investment in hardware technologies, as well as ensuring that the policy side is recognized that not all solutions are created equal. And today we do a lot of things that seemingly placate the ability to think that we have a handle on what's going on, but it's actually woefully inadequate in terms of how we're actually managing, maintaining.
Sure, would appreciate continuing this conversation, but I am woefully out of time, so I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop.
Mr. Chairman, I yield my time to you.
Thank you. Quick question on the creating a sense of security for the public on AI. There's all the fear that's out there, and are there requirements that we can place in the system that would give people a sense of security, kill switches, always having a person in the system? What are some things that we can do to give the public a sense of security that we're not going to create, the Terminator or something like that? Anyone? You're smiling.
I would say human review and control is one of several factors that's critical for something like this. Again, I think you need strong principles to ensure responsible use, all the way from creation to what data you're putting into systems and what systems you're using AI for, to what data you're taking out and how you're using it. As you said, for human review, one of those steps on the outside is there should be human cooperation for AI results. It shouldn't just be AI making its own decisions. And we have to know how reliable AI is in certain circumstances. Sometimes it can provide small bits of insight, sometimes it can be very reliable, sometimes it gives a degree and you have to treat it with a bit of skepticism, but also maybe it provides a bit of value. Along those lines, not just human review, but especially trained staff. That's why it's so important for folks that won't just overcome general automation bias. That's the tendency for individuals to always just assume that automated systems tend to work better than humans. That's been documented in many cases. But you need to understand what type of biases or what type of reliability you might want to apply to any given AI system in any situation.
Mr. Amlani, Mr. Laperruque has said some negative things about facial recognition earlier, I think, if I heard it. Maybe not negative, but concerning. And the fairness, the use of it against large groups, population stuff, law enforcement. What's your thoughts on the reliability of facial recognition? And since this is your field, is there something, I'm aware in my district of a company that has the use of the three-dimensional vasculature in the hand, for example, which apparently, according to them, hasn't failed, but facial recognition has failed. And so what are your thoughts on, because I think you're right, it sort of begins and ends with being able to make sure the person is the person in the system to make sure that, so what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually a really important question. From even going back to your prior question about building confidence in individuals and systems in AI, I think it ties to that as well, which is fundamentally, post 9/11, after the terrorist attacks, one of the steps that we did is we actually federalized a workforce and created TSA. Having federal agents at the checkpoints actually made people feel safer to get back on airplanes again. That used to just be a private contracted workforce paid for primarily by the airports and the airlines. But by having federal agents there, it made people feel more comfortable. So these steps are really important to be able to put into place. People do not feel comfortable right now with identification and authentication steps that are necessary right now to access systems. Passwords are antiquated. People forget passwords. The most secure place to actually store passwords, according to all of the major cybersecurity experts in the field right now, is actually in a personal book that you write with you, because nobody overseas actually is trying to steal your personal book of passwords. They can access your systems. They can steal centralized places where you store passwords, but your book of passwords is something that they have very difficult access to receive. And so leveraging better authentication mechanisms builds confidence in digital tools and capabilities. People have become very comfortable with Face ID to be able to actually secure their systems. People have no confidence in what Ranking Member Thompson mentioned with regards to CAPTCHAs. right? And other silly systems like one-time passcodes that get sent to your phone, which are very easily compromised. And so giving people that confidence with facial matching and facial recognition and facial verification is an important component.
If I can jump in now, because I want, in the time remaining, I have a quick question for Mr. Sikorski. Data poisoning, how big of a threat is that for the AI systems that are using that data to make very quick decisions, particularly in the defense world? And if we need to go somewhere else to have that conversation, we can postpone it till then. But if you could just real quickly share a few concerns about that, if you have any.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the secure AI by design, right? As we're building out these applications, how are we securing that information? How are we securing the models themselves that make the decisions, as well as the training data that goes there? And there is a lot of research and a lot of thought about what attackers could do if they can manipulate that data, which would then in turn not even necessitate an attack against the technology itself. It's an attack against the underlying data with which it's trained with. And that's definitely a concern that needs to be taken into account and built into as the technology is being built out.
Thank you. I yield, and Mr. Goldman, the gentleman from New York, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. The 2024 Worldwide Threat Assessment warns that our most sophisticated adversaries, Russia, Iran, and China, see the upcoming presidential election as an opportunity to sow disinformation, divide Americans, and undercut our democracy. And many of our law enforcement and intelligence agencies have confirmed that they are also seeing upcoming threats. Of course, it's not abstract. We know Russia used social media and cyber to interfere in our election in 2016. We know that Iranian actors posed as Proud Boys in an online operation aimed at intimidating voters in 2020. And just recently, we learned that China is experimenting with AI to enhance their influence operations. Within the Department of Homeland Security, CISA is charged with protecting the security of our elections. And Mr. Sikorski, I know you work closely with CISA on some of these issues. And I'd love just to ask you a relatively open-ended question, which is how is CISA prepared, or how is our government writ large prepared to address the use of AI by foreign adversaries to undermine and interfere in our elections?
That's an excellent question, as we want to have a very secure election, obviously. And I think CISA is doing a great job with the JCDC, which is the collaboration with private industry, to work with us, Palo Alto Networks, and many other private entities on thinking through, like, what are we actually seeing in the threat landscape? So one of the things I'm tasked with as running the threat intelligence division at Palo Alto Networks is how do we take all of the information that we're getting from other private entities, from government agencies around the world, bring that all together and then share that back with the government itself to say, this is where we're seeing these threat actors go, right? Whether it be what China is up to today, what Russia is doing in the war in Ukraine, staying on top of those threats and finding the new ones. For example, we saw a novel attack of how Russia was sending emails, phishing emails to Ukrainian embassies, and actually making that discovery and showing how that actually went down. So that hyper collaboration is definitely going to move the needle.
One of the biggest threats is deepfakes. Which we know our intelligence agencies said that they had spotted Chinese and Iranian deepfakes in 2020 that were not used. But the FBI has recently identified that recent elections in Slovakia were impacted by the use of deepfakes. How prepared are we to prohibit or prevent the use of deepfakes that might have a significant impact on our election?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen with AI, it really lowers the bar for attackers to be able to generate believable communications, whether that's emails, like I talked about earlier with phishing, whether it be voice or even deepfake technology. So I think that that lowering of the bar makes it a lot easier to make believable things that they're gonna select. And Palo Alto Networks, we're not hyper-focused on eliminating deep fake technology, and I think that impact of inauthentic content is really concerning and something we need to explore.
Anyone else have any insight into this?
Yes, at iProov, we are actually obsessed with detecting deepfakes. That is actually what we do. We use screen lighting from a cell phone screen or a desktop screen that reflects against live human skin, calculating 3D geometry, making sure that it's a live human being, including skin translucency, all simultaneously while you're actually recording a video or doing a biometric match. And verifying that it's a live human being and the right person at the right time, with being there at the creation of the video is an important component that you can then tag the video and verify that it's in fact not a deepfake.
And are you coordinating with CISA on this?
No, we have not been asked by CISA.
Mr. Laperruque?
Yeah, beyond just the strict cyber risks, I mean, deepfakes is something that our elections team and misinformation in general has highlighted that one of the risks is the liar's benefit, that, in addition to misinformation going out there, then this is something that when you're evaluating truthful information, someone could just say, no, that was just a deep fake, no, that was just misinformation. It's not just the initial itself misinformation, is trying to create an entire ecosystem of uncertainty. So that's to emphasize why it's such a significant threat and why we need to make sure that we have clear information and ways of trying to debunk this that are reliable.
Mr. Chairman, I know that you and oh, he's not here, but you and many of the members on this committee are concerned about election security, and I would just urge you to encourage some of your colleagues who are trying to interfere with law enforcement's efforts to coordinate election security and prevent election interference with the cyber companies through which the adversaries try to influence. And I hope that we don't see any more members of the Republican Party trying to cut funding in CISA, and that we work closely with CISA to make sure that our elections are safe. And I yield back.
Mr. Goldman yields. The chair now recognizes Mr. Crane from Arizona for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realize that this hearing is about utilizing AI to bolster Homeland security. I want to bring up an interesting meeting I just had in my office before coming to the committee. I was with one of the largest tech companies in the United States and arguably global companies. And they were talking about major cybersecurity attacks that they're seeing. I was told that they used to see attacks in the range of tens of thousands a day. They're now seeing attacks to the tune of about 150,000 a day. Mr. Demmer, Mr. Sikorski, is that consistent with you all, what you all are seeing and hearing in your space as well? An increase in cyber attacks?
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. We've actually seen a great increase in cyber attacks, and the number of pure attacks that we're stopping in a per day basis across all of our customers, which is 65,000 customers, is in the billions.
Per day.
Now, actual net new, it's in the millions, but that still gives you a sense of how many new attacks are going on, and then we see the cadence of ransomware attacks and extortion continuing to increase as all these ransom gangs have evolved.
This company also told me that not only are the numbers of attacks on a daily basis increasing drastically, but they also said the brazenness of some of these foreign actors is becoming more and more hostile and increased as well. Is that something that you all can verify, that you're seeing as well?
Yes, I think the days of a ransomware attack where they just encrypt files and you're just paying for a key, we actually miss those days because now they're stealing the data and harassing our customers to get ransomware payments. So they're taking that data, which has their customer information, patient data in some instances, threatening to leak that out, and really going to what I call a dark place of the level of harassment they're willing to go to. They're sending flowers to executives And they're even going after companies' customers, pretending to spam them as the company, when in fact they're the threat actor harassing their customers and then leading to getting the payment that they're after.
My real question to you guys is, what do you attribute this stark and drastic rise in aggression and the amount of cyber attacks that we are now seeing against our own corporations and also our infrastructure? Mr. Demmer, I'll start with you.
So thank you, Congressman, for the question. My expertise really lies on the physical infrastructure, the critical assets that we help maintain and protect. I can say that the threats are arising on our critical energy systems, on our infrastructure like bridges and roadways and dams. And although we haven't seen the pace of attacks that we are seeing on the cyber side, it is a real vulnerability and a risk as our infrastructure ages and has more vulnerabilities. And so it's something that our company is.
What about you, Mr. Sikorski?
I think the threat actors, specifically in crimeware, when we talk about ransomware, have become a business where it's actually not the same hacker who's breaking in and then doing the ransomware and everything else. It's actually one group breaks in and then they sell that access on the dark web to ransomware gangs who are almost like franchises, like McDonald's or something, where they pop up, they have a reputation score of how likely they're to do what they say they're gonna do about giving the data back. And that enables them to build the relationships and get the access they need. And so it's operated like a 9-to-5 job for some of these ransomware operators.
Let me ask you something more pointedly. Do you believe that some of these nation states and some of these foreign actors, do you think that they sense weakness here in the United States? Do you think that has anything to do with it?
So I don't think that I could speak to if they sense weakness or not. I think it's more an opportunistic thing from what I see. We've seen them leverage vulnerabilities.
Did those opportunities, sir, were they not present a couple years ago?
I would say those opportunities have always been present. There's always been vulnerabilities in systems. However, the availability and opportunity for them to figure out how to get in has increased. They are better enabled, and now that they're operating in this model, and it makes them more efficient and able to pull out over attacks.
What do you think we could be doing? Do you think we're doing enough offensively to make sure that individuals that would utilize these types of technologies to attack corporations and U.S. infrastructure, what do you think we could be a better job of doing to make sure that they pay a heavy price if they're going to carry out these type of attacks against our country?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I think about, I'm not a policymaker as far as thinking what's the best stick to have when it comes to dealing with a cyber threat. One of the things that I'm always focused on is on the defensive side, right? And how do we make sure we're doing everything we can to secure, and then opening all the lanes for sharing on the threat intelligence front, which is big steps and strides we have made in recent years, the last few years. All of this collaboration that's happening is moving the needle, and I think that'll help a lot us stay in front of what the adversary is. That being said, we're in an arms race right now on AI, right? And the defenders need to win here, because one opportunity we have is we could use AI to remove all those vulnerabilities I was talking about before the threat actors can use AI to find them.
Thank you. Thank you for the extension. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman being last gets some extra grace, as did Mr. Goldman. The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Kennedy from New York for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the ranker, and thank you to the panel today for your testimony. We're hearing a lot about advancements in AI and the upcoming election. It's a historic election. We want to make sure that it is secure. And as November approaches, there's more and more concern about those that would seek to undermine our election. As a matter of fact, just last week, a report from the Department of Homeland Security warned, I'll quote, "As the 2024 election cycle progresses, Generative AI tools likely provide both domestic and foreign threat actors with enhanced opportunities for interference by aggravating emergent events, disrupting election processes, or attacking election infrastructure. So I worry about the rapid advances having an impact on the election as we're discussing here today. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is responsible for election security. Mr. Laperruque, how can this agency best support election officials and United States voters so that they can trust the authenticity of the content that they're seeing when they see information online?
Well, as I said before, I think this is an area where we can learn a lot of lessons from what we've taken in cybersecurity space over the last 5 to 10 years, using these type of federal agencies to distribute information out to the huge range of local election administrators as well as the public, and that can come from both providing education about how these technologies work, how threats work, what to be aware of, as well as information about specific threats if there is something on our monitor, some sort of common deep fake technique, some sort of new type of attack, providing information in that field. It's something where, because our election system is so decentralized, and because there is a lot of information out there, sort of acting as that hub of getting out good and useful information and warnings can be very important.
And what do you foresee as a role for the Cybersecurity and Security Agency in authenticating content online in regards to the upcoming election?
I think that would be a much more challenging question if we're talking about just content from any lay person, as opposed to a message that may be targeted at an election administrator. That's something that our elections team, which is separate from my work, does a lot of research into. So I would encourage continued work with them. They're always happy to provide thought and detailed research into this space.
Great, thank you. And then, Chairman, I know Chairman Green earlier mentioned his community, but I want to plug the University at Buffalo, which established the UB Institute for Artificial Intelligence and Data Science to explore ways to combine machines' ability to ingest and connect. In 2021, just this past year, the New York State budget included $275 million for the University at Buffalo's new AI Center. So, Mr. Amlani, when you're searching for universities with your 15-year-old, you should look at Buffalo and the engineering school that they have there right in the heart of my community. But how can we better harness the institutes of higher ed, especially our public institutions, for getting at this cutting-edge technology? And while they're training up our youth in this new technology, how do we make sure that they're developing it in a safe way regarding AI?
Thank you so much for your question, Congressman. My son and I would love to come to Buffalo. We would also love to be able to visit Niagara Falls.
You're always welcome.
Thank you. Fundamentally, I think there is a level of distrust in some of the AI content created, and much of that distrust is not knowing who or where the content came from. And so it comes down to identity, properly identifying the creator and properly verifying the content has not been tampered with after it was created by the initial creator. And so making sure that you're able to identify the initial creator is a very important component on trusting all of this content, and also for intellectual property concerns and other aspects of things that we've already discussed here today. And so using proper identification tools, things that can verify that it's the right person, it's the real person, and it's right now, to allow the individual to have ease of use to be able to identify themselves and verify they are who they say they are, and the content is coming from them.
Thank you. I yield my time.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize myself 5 minutes. So for the purpose of, this committee, I think a lot of the questions are centered around the border and how AI can help us be able to identify fraud, also protect entities within the United States. That's where I want to go here initially. the ability of your company to help bolster border security, for those of you that are representing the free market, I really, Mr. Sikorski, you had alluded to, I've got some information here, where AI-powered co-pilots, my understanding, it's a natural language assistance that can yield, you guys state, multiple operational advantages. I'm actually curious as to when we're doing our initial credible fear interviews, asylum claims, if our border security officials can utilize that tool to better inform the cases of the future, so that as people are being coached for those interviews, what can be fraud, language barrier can exist, and they can be told to say certain keywords. Are you all or anyone on the panel aware of how we can make sure that we can get to the depth of fraud for our officers to be able to use AI to be able to get past a language barrier that can be used as a defensive mechanism to the benefit of those who are applying, help us get to the truth of the matter?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'll take from my experience helping to create that technology at Palo Alto Networks. So when we say co-pilot, what we mean is you have a human who's using technology to find new threats, right? That's what we sell. But it's very difficult to use. So what we end up doing is we built these technologies called co-pilots for our products so that users can engage very quickly to ask questions. Just, and then the AI will process the question and give them the answer that's there so that they don't have to figure out all of the complexities of our product. I think what you can do is you could take what we've done in that capacity and apply that to a use case like what you're talking about, where you can say they get a co-pilot and they're paying attention to what they're collecting, what information, and the AI maybe says to them, hey, I saw it differently than you saw it when I feed all this in and put it against my model. And then you could put the two side by side, and it's sort of like Iron Man, where you put on the suit and you're more powerful than you were before. And that's sort of one area I would think to go into.
So to elaborate, if I'm understanding you correctly, you do think that CBP officials could be empowered in those moments to help inform the case. But I'm assuming there's also the defensive mechanism that someone crossing illegally with a credible fear asylum claim wanting to be fraudulent could also use that technology to time delay, read the question, and then I'm assuming the technology is moving there where they can get a response to help their case also that's AI generated.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on, the border and how those policies are to figure out, what the best way is on immigration and other things. However, the thought process is the types of things we're doing with AI to enable customers or prevent cyber threats, the model is similar for really anybody who's collecting data to make better decisions that they might not otherwise do by themselves.
Let me move on. The rise of AI, the significant question about, concerns, constitutional, election. AI can be very dangerous. We know with China, social credit scores and the ability to have facial recognition, AI powered, that then may produce a different outcome depending upon whether you adhere to the government's positions or not. So there's a real fear, and it's a credible fear out there for those of us that think this could be used or weaponized against a nation's citizenry. I want to ask, from your perspective, the significant concerns you have regarding the AI of the future, and if anybody wants to talk about election fraud, specifically candidates that can be created to look like they're saying something that they're not actually saying, and how that can be generated, the ability for a user, I'm not talking about government regulation here, but for a user to have a fact check, something that could be encrypted where I could have the ability to determine whether or not that was created or if that's an actual video. Anybody wants to respond to that?
Sure, I think the identity of the creator is actually a very important component up front, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Congressman. And I believe that right now that is not actually associated with most of the videos. It is shared openly It is shared on open sites, and you can never really tell who created the original video. If you had the ability to be able to do so, at least you would have some confidence that the video itself was actually created originally by the initial creator. But there is some watermarking tools and other technologies being used by other companies that there's some investment in that space currently today to be able to assess it.
Interesting. I want to honor the time here. With that, I yield to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member and abstention for holding this important hearing. Let me also thank our panel of witnesses for bringing their expertise to bear today. The rapid advancements in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity represent significant new opportunities and challenges with respect to securing the homeland. Every day, developers are creating new AI tools to better identify and respond to the increasing number of cyber attacks. But while AI is a critical tool in our cyber defenses, it is also still created and deployed by human beings. AI systems are trained on data sets which often replicate human biases, and thus the bias is built into the very technology created to improve our lives and keep us safe. For example, AI designed for law enforcement purposes that was trained on historic police or crime data may serve to reproduce or expand existing inequities in policing, as those are not an accurate reflection of crime, but rather of police activity and crime reporting, which can be fraught with bias. While artificial intelligence and cybersecurity will remain important elements defending the country, these are not just technological issues, but critical civil and human rights issues as well. To that end, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an insightful article on this topic published in Wired.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This article, written by Nicole Tisdale, a former staffer of this committee and the National Security Council, provides valuable context on the societal impacts of cyber threats, the need for inclusive cybersecurity strategies. Developers and deployers of artificial intelligence, whether in the realm of securing the homeland or providing a service to consumers, must be thoughtful and intentional in the creation and rollout of this technology. Similarly, we as policymakers must be deliberate and meticulous in our choices as we work towards major legislative efforts, such as creating a framework for the use of AI and securing the homeland, as well as in crafting a comprehensive data privacy standard, which remains foundational to our work on AI and the range of other issues. We must all take care to ensure that civil rights and the principles of our democracy are baked into this emerging technology, because once it gets out, there will be no putting the genie back in the bottle. Mr. Sikorski, you've encouraged the government to consider different standards for different use cases, recognizing that certain uses of AI may not pose the same civil liberties concerns as others. Can you elaborate on why you think such differentiation is important and how you think the federal government should identify which uses of AI should trigger heightened security while keeping American civil rights top of mind?
That's an excellent question, Congresswoman. I think about, whenever you're applying security to something, people see it as an inconvenience. They don't want to do it. So, and especially when it comes to innovation as well, people are moving very fast with this technology, and we need to think about security as we do it rather than just rushing to get it out there. Because like you said, it's unstoppable once it's out, right? The genie's out of the bottle. So I think that when I look at cybersecurity specifically and the defense challenges we have, we spoke earlier about the amount of threats and the amount of attacks going up over time. And that our adversaries, we also touched upon, are leveraging AI and trying to figure out how they could produce more attacks leveraging AI. So it's very important, I think, to keep innovating very quickly on the security side and focus on, well, that data is the ones and the zeros, the malware, the what's happening on a system, what is vulnerable, and using that as the inputs to make the decisions. I think when it comes to things like you mentioned, policing, You could go to employment, credit, education, college application, wherever this ends up going. It's important to really take a look at those, high-risk cases and take an approach to regulation that has a purpose and why you're doing it. Because in those impacts, it's really impacting people's lives in a way that maybe with cybersecurity, it's like we're helping people's lives by preventing them getting attacked.
Very well, thank you. Mr. Laperruque, do you agree that we should have different standards for different use cases? And what use cases do you believe pose the greatest civil rights and privacy risks? And other witnesses are also welcome to chime in.
There are certainly some types of oversight that should be universal. A lot of the principles I'd mentioned for ensuring accurate results and efficacy, you'd want to apply across the board. But at the same time, there are certain forms of AI that do create heightened risk to individual rights and liberties that we do need to have heightened standards and safeguards for. Any type of AI, for example, that might be used to help make a designation that an individual should be the target of an investigation, subject to surveillance, or arrested. That's a obvious example where there's severe rights impacting ramifications to a use of AI that would warrant heightened scrutiny and a number of extra safeguards you would probably want to have in place to make sure that uses are efficacious and that you are not having problems such as the biases that you've mentioned.
The gentlelady yields. With that, I want to thank the witnesses for your valuable testimony before this committee today. We would ask the witnesses to respond to any additional questions in writing pursuant to Committee Rule 7D. The hearing record will be open for 10 days. And without objection, this committee now stands adjourned.